Chapter 402. According to past practice, envoys from other kingdoms were usually received in the Hall of Sky Dome, but the rubble from the collapsed ceiling had just been cleaned, and it was still a long way from being repaired. Thinking of this, Timothy's hatred towards Roland increased by a fraction. Take them to my study. He pondered for a moment and finally decided to receive them in the palace. It would be rude to bring the envoys to the basement. As for the purpose of their visit, it was most likely to be to seek help, either in terms of food or cold-resistant materials. There was a saying among the nobles that they contacted friends in the summer and enemies in the winter. This saying was also true between kingdoms. Timothy secretly shook his head. He still had many things to do, so it was better to send the envoys away as soon as possible. When he returned to the study, the two members of the envoy delegation had been waiting for a long time accompanied by Sir Brent. When they saw His Majesty, they stood up and bowed. Respected King of Grey Castle, Wimbledon 4, the King of the Kingdom of Dawn sends his regards to you. Greetings to him too. Timothy nodded casually. Have a seat. He noticed that the man and the woman were both very young and looked quite similar. The family emblem on their chests was an antler scepter. If he remembered correctly, they should be from the famous Luoshi family in the Kingdom of Dawn. But what on earth was King of Dawn Mizala thinking? How could he send such a young man as a begging negotiator? Timothy was a little surprised. Most nobles at this age were proud and arrogant. Compared to the old guys who shamelessly cried poverty at the negotiating table for help, they were really too different. You're both members of the giant deer family, right? Timothy pointed to his chest. I've met Duke Luoshi once. Indeed, Your Majesty. The young man smiled. My name is Otto Luoshi and this is my sister, Belinda Luoshi. They're brother and sister. He raised his eyebrows. In that case, there was no need for him to beat around the bush with them. Now is the time when the months of demons are raging. May I know why the King of Dawn sent you here? Timothy was the first to speak. If you are in urgent need of food, cotton, or linen, I can only move some from my own palace to show my sincerity. You should know that the royal decree for the selection of the crown prince has turned the kingdom into a mess. Many places have fallen into a state of paralysis. Just the relief of the refugees has depleted the capital's food reserves. It's very difficult to take out more supplies. I deeply regret this matter, Otto said with a hand on his chest. But Mizala 4 did not send us here to plead for help, but to deal with a greater threat. Timothy was slightly startled by his words. What threat? The Church, Your Majesty, Belinda continued. Now the army of the Church has occupied the Kingdom of Everwinter and the Kingdom of Wolfheart, and a large number of fugitives have poured into the Kingdom of Dawn. According to the news they brought, the Church is extremely vicious and has seriously violated the rules of war among the nobles. They will hang or exile those who resist. Only the nobles who completely submit to them can survive. This method is completely intended to eliminate the nobles and completely bring the territories under the control of the Church. Otto's tone was rather heavy. Mizala 4 believes that the Kingdom of Wolfheart won't be their final target. The Kingdom of Dawn and Grey Castle are now in a precarious situation. In the coming year, the Church is likely to launch a new war and bring the flames of war to our land. The King of Dawn hopes that the two countries can unite and fight against the Church. Are you sure that the Kingdom of Wolfheart has fallen? Timothy could not help but frown after listening to the other side's statement. Absolutely, Your Majesty. The two nodded. Timothy had heard a little about the invasion of the Church, but he did not expect that the Church would be able to conquer two kingdoms in such a short period of time. If they were not lying, then the power displayed by the Church was a little too terrifying. Of course, he had to confirm this with the Minister of Intelligence. The early arrival of the snow in the months of demons had hindered the caravan's journey, and he had not received any news from the Kingdom of Wolfheart for a long time. After a long silence, Timothy asked, What's the specific plan? Otto licked his lips, took out a roll of map from his bosom, and spread it in front of Timothy. If the Church sets off from the Holy City and attacks the Kingdom of Dawn or Grey Castle, then the other country will lead its army north and attack the Holy City of Hermes. This will curb the Church's offensive and make it impossible for the two countries to attack each other. An offensive and defensive agreement. Yes, Your Majesty, the messenger replied. Regardless of whether they set off from Coldwind Ridge in Greycastle, or from Northshire in the Kingdom of Dawn, they can reach the holy city of Hermes within a week. As long as the main forces are stationed in these two cities, the church may retreat. If this war can be avoided, it will be a blessing for both countries. In this way, he would not be able to buy the pills from the church. Timothy thought to himself, without the pills, how can I drive Roland Wimbledon out of the western region? However, the church was also a target that he had to be wary of. It was best to buy enough pills and unify the whole territory of Greycastle before reaching an agreement with the Kingdom of Dawn. This is a matter of great importance. I need to discuss it with the ministers before I can make a decision. You can stay in the palace for the time being and wait for news. Of course, Your Majesty. In addition, I want to ask, how much do you know about the situation in the Kingdom of Everwinter and the Kingdom of Wolfheart? Did you get all the information from the refugees? There are some reports from spies, but not much. The church besieged Broken Tooth Castle and Wolfheart City while blocking the roads around the cities, so we don't know much about the process of the battle, Otto replied. O'Toole replied. According to the refugees, the church used a terrifying siege weapon and destroyed the walls of Wolfheart City in just one day. That's probably also a snow powder weapon, which was probably leaked by Third Sister. That's not what I'm asking about. Timothy waved his hand. Have you heard any news about the Black Sail Fleet and Garcia Wimbledon? Well, the two looked at each other before Belinda said cautiously, I heard that she and Wolfheart were killed by the church's arrows when they were escaping from King City. Garcia and Wolfheart were together? Timothy's heart skipped a beat. Did you see their bodies? No. But judging from the church's propaganda and the silence of the Kingdom of Wolfheart, the chances of them escaping were not high. Is that so? Timothy exhaled. Although he was a little disappointed, this was one of the few pieces of good news since the beginning of winter. He hoped that they were right. All right, you can leave now. Otto hesitated for a moment. Well, there's one more thing. You said that you could provide some food and cloth, could you? Sure enough, it's troublesome to contact people in winter. He shrugged. Fine, I'll just take it as a reward for the information about Garcia's death. I'll arrange for people to carry it out. Thank you, Your Majesty. The two bowed happily. Watching the messenger leave, Timothy could not help but raise the corner of his mouth. Roland Wimbledon, did you hear that? This is the fate of rebels, and you'll end up like them. Don't tell me that the words you said when you activated the sleeping spell were just to tease us? Sooner or later, no one will care about us. That's not necessarily true, someone behind him suddenly chimed in. Whether it's the fjords or the Four Kingdoms, there's only one bounty guild formed by witches. If you don't patronize us, others will naturally come. You again? The merchant turned his head and couldn't help but be startled. Thunder, Lord Thunder. When the sleeping spell was drawing up the rules, I came up with an idea. Signing the contract requires the consent of the employees, considering the possible risks in the task. We can't force them to go through a mountain of blades and a sea of flames, Thunder said with a clear laugh. Do you think there's a problem? No, it's very reasonable. Durat's expression quickly returned to normal. Then, I'll have to trouble you in the future, Miss Lotus. Phew. Lotus looked at the back of the merchant and his party and breathed a sigh of relief. Thank you. It's okay, I just happened to pass by. Thunder smiled. Didn't you go to the western region with Lady Tilly? Yes, but I came back with Honey and Breeze because Sleeping Island needs to prepare supplies and houses for the winter. She briefly explained what had happened. Have you completed your adventure? Ha, yes, it was really an incredible journey. When it came to the adventure, Thunder's eyes lit up. It was the first time I saw a sea of completely different heights. The ship almost seemed to be flying, sailing vertically toward the precipice formed by the waves, but we didn't fall into the deep sea. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I would never have believed that such a strange scene existed in the world. Sea of different heights. Lotus murmured. What kind of scene is that? The sea isn't a stone, can't it flow down? Well, I named it the Sealine, which is northeast of the Shadow Islands. After climbing over it, The precipice is like a long line with no end in sight, dividing the sea into two distinct sections. He excitedly patted his chest. I can't wait to try the next farther voyage. He's worthy of being the most outstanding explorer in the fjords. The first thing he talks about when he comes back is adventure, and not his daughter in the western region. Lotus looked at his endless talk and shook her head helplessly. When night fell, the temperature outside plummeted. Lotus climbed into bed early, which was also the most relaxing moment of the day. Over the past month, in addition to building a new batch of houses, she had also remodeled the other witches' old houses. She would huddle with the others on the warm Kong bed, chatting about what she had seen and heard in Border Town, and answering her companions' sometimes curious and sometimes envious questions. She could casually talk for most of the night. This time, she talked about the bird beak mushroom. When he talked about rolling it in a little bit of butter a few times, frying it until both sides were golden brown, and sprinkling some salt on it to make an extremely delicious dish, the sound of people swallowing their saliva could be heard in unison. "Ah, I also want to eat this," Shadow shouted. "After chewing dried fish on the ship for a month, my mouth is full of salt." "That's great." Molly couldn't help but pinch Lotus. "If only Lady Tilly's brother had invited me." "Hey, what's more amazing is that you haven't heard," someone laughed. "The water comes directly from the wall when bathing there. And there's also a fragrant soap that emits a fragrance after bathing." "There's really such a thing?" Shadow asked curiously. "Of course, I also brought one back." Lotus curled her lips. "But it's already been used up." "Don't talk about that. At least they've experienced it. I followed Lady Tilly to the western region, and then immediately brought them back, so I didn't enjoy anything," Breeze complained. Listening to the witch's lively discussion, Lotus suddenly couldn't help but have an idea pop up in her mind. If the person who wanted to hire her for a long time was His Highness Roland Wimbledon, instead of Durat Goldbeard, would she agree? After thinking about it, she realized that if the other party was Roland, she wouldn't be able to say a word of refusal. It would be too shameful. Lotus shrank back into the quilt and looked around. Fortunately, the oil lamp had been blown out, so no one would discover her thoughts. But when would Lady Tilly accept His Highness Roland? If only they could always be together. Lotus tightened the scarf in her arms. In this way, whether it was herself or the other witches, they could all live happily in Border Town. Chapter 404. A genius in a second to remember if you want to go? On the internet, we provide you with wonderful novels to read. At the beginning of the second month of winter, Barav walked into Roland's office with a stack of books under his arm. As soon as he walked to the table, his eyes were attracted by a huge colorful picture on the table. "Is this a map of the entire western region?" "Not only the western region," Roland said with a smile. "It also includes a part of the barbarian land and the misty forest, especially this open space." He pointed to the area north of the impassable mountain range, which was the fertile plains mentioned by Agatha. At present, the explored area is nearly the size of 3 western regions. If we can reclaim it, it can support hundreds of thousands of people. In order to completely eliminate the threat of Devil's Town, he asked Lightning and Maggie to scan the area and draw a map. Since Maggie could now carry Soroya to do the drawing, the map was more accurate. Although the mystery of the disappearance of Devil's Town remained unsolved, the good news was that there were no signs of a second enemy camp within 200 kilometers of Border Town. But there are not only demonic beasts in the barbarian land, but also the terrible enemies you mentioned. Barav hesitated. "Isn't it too dangerous to reclaim the land in the northwest? By that time, the First Army should also have the power to fight against the demons." Roland slowly moved his finger on the plane. "If we can't defeat these enemies, it doesn't matter where we build our territory." Since the appearance of demon scouts in the misty forest, he realized that it was no longer suitable to hide the news. In order to avoid panic caused by sudden exposure, the prince revealed the existence of the demons to a few high-level officials. As far as the current situation was concerned, the reaction of the people was quite normal. Of course, he also slightly suppressed the strength of the demons, claimed that these enemies were basically equivalent to demonic hybrids, and did not reveal the history of the previous 2 battles of divine will. Roland knew that he could not stay at the border of the continent forever. Compared to the Four Kingdoms, the barbarian land, or the fertile plains, was a place worth managing. The explored area was only a corner of the entire plain. It was not hard to imagine how vast the territory occupied by human beings was during the Second Battle of Divine Will. He retracted his finger, rolled up the map, and put it aside. "Do you have anything to report?" "Yes, Your Highness." Barav nodded and spread the book under his arm in front of the prince. "I have already drawn up a plan to expand the city hall according to your request." "Oh, let me see." In order to cope with the rapid growth of the territory after the construction of the city, Roland formulated a new framework for the future management organization, according to the classification of the functional departments of the later government. Generally speaking, the entire upper echelons were divided into 4 parts: City Hall, the Army, the Security Bureau, and the Witch Union. According to the expansion plan, the new City Hall would assume the role of the Cabinet or the State Council, and would also be the core organization of the entire territory. At that time, the number of employees would be increased to about 500, with 6 departments: finance, foreign affairs, education, agriculture, industry, and justice. New departments could be added at any time according to the needs. In addition, after Grey Castle was unified, other cities could follow suit and set up corresponding subordinate organizations, which would be managed by City Hall. In addition to combat personnel, the Army also had independent production departments and medical departments as logistical support. Each army would have a commander-in-chief, who was responsible for specific combat matters, and the highest authority of the army belonged to the commander-in-chief. The Security Bureau was a secret organization hidden in the dark. Its funds were not allocated by City Hall, and its members were not recorded in the files. Its main function was to monitor the territory's internal security and official corruption. Finally, there was the Witch Union. Roland thought about this organization for a long time, and finally decided to count it as an independent department, rather than separate it and integrate the witches into other departments. The reason was that some witches' abilities were so different before and after the evolution that they could work in multiple departments. For example, Anna and Soroya, from industry to agriculture, and then to national defense and education, they could play an important role. Another point was that some witches did not have a job for the time being, but it did not mean that it would be the same in the future. Grouping them together could effectively avoid dampening their enthusiasm. This was also what Scroll and Vindy had mentioned to him. He hoped that in the future, the Witch Union would be able to operate on its own, including accepting witches, checking their abilities, and assigning jobs. "Can you recruit so many literate people?" Roland looked up and asked after he finished reading the City Hall director's proposal. An organization of 500 people was definitely considered huge in this era, and it required everyone to be able to read documents, which was almost impossible to achieve in other territories. It might be possible to find so many literate people in the king's city, but the proud nobles would certainly not be willing to serve as an apprentice. With the addition of the new batch of graduates, there should be no problem, Barav replied. Now from the feedback of the recruitment announcement, the position in City Hall is the most popular. It seems that the popularity of being a civil servant is the same in any world. Roland could not help but raise the corner of his mouth. In that case, let's recruit people according to the proposal. The next task is to formulate the laws. As long as you give me the main provisions you mentioned last time, I'll gather the apprentices to complete the rest as soon as possible, the City Hall director said in high spirits. That's called the basic law, Roland smiled. It seemed that the witches were not the only model workers who were interested in their work. For a new regime, this was a good sign. By the way, Your Highness, Barav said, if we expand the size of the City Hall according to the plan, the current house may not be able to accommodate so many people. Can we build a new City Hall? The prince nodded. Of course, I'll arrange for Car to carry it out. In the eyes of the subjects, this was equivalent to the face of the Lord. They rarely had the opportunity to step into the castle, but often went to the City Hall to handle affairs, so a certain degree of luxury and style was still necessary. If it was too simple and close to the people, it would instead reduce the trust of the people. After waiting for Barav to leave, Roland asked his guards to summon Prestiza, the knight of the elk family. Roland had not seen him for more than half a year, and he had obviously gained weight. His cheeks were glowing red, and it seemed that he was living a good life. Recently, there have been a lot of eggs and poultry in the convenience market, and it's all thanks to you, Roland said with a smile. It seems that you're really good at raising chickens and ducks. Haha. He smiled a little embarrassedly. Without your initial support, I wouldn't have been able to do this. The path of breeding was not always smooth sailing. In the beginning, there was a foul plague, which caused a large number of chickens to die. With the idea of paying his tuition, Roland did not throw him into the mine, but continued to buy chicken seedlings from the stronghold and let him raise them. Now, Prius could be regarded as one of the irreplaceable talents in Border Town. I plan to let you work in the city hall under the Ministry of Agriculture. Are you willing? Your Highness, you don't want me to continue feeding chickens and ducks? Prius was slightly startled. Of course not. You've done a good job, so I hope you can bring more people to invest in this industry, Roland encouraged him. Next, I plan to expand the scale of breeding by dozens of times. You and your family won't be able to take care of everything. After you join the city hall, you can pass on your experience to more people and guide them on how to raise chickens. With Lily's ability to kill bacteria and get rid of diseases, the thorniest problem in animal husbandry no longer existed. Not only chickens and ducks, but also the breeding of large livestock such as cattle and sheep was obviously part of the prince's expansion plan. This is undoubtedly a great job, no less than the honor brought by the identity of a knight. The prince paused and then said, "One day, eggs and poultry will be served on the dining table of every household in the western region. And when they see these delicious foods, they will firmly remember your name. What do you think?" "I am willing to serve you." Prius excitedly clenched his fist in front of his chest and bowed in response. Chapter 405. Genius 1 Second to Remember Love? Go. TalkNet, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Nana got up from the bed and yawned loudly. She glanced at the white sky outside the window, but it was still the same snowy scene. The little girl reluctantly moved out of the warm quilt, put on a thick winter coat, and slowly walked out of the bedroom, only to see Aunt Ada cleaning the living room. "Good morning," she said vaguely. "Ah, little princess, you're up." Ada smiled at her. "Do you want breakfast? It's already heated up." "Yes." Nana sat at the table, glanced around the room, but did not find her father. "Where's my father?" "Lord Pine went out early in the morning." Ada's voice came from the kitchen. "He carried his silver shotgun." Sure enough, she curled her lips. "He probably went to the city wall to practice shooting." Ever since he fought against demonic beasts with a gun, he had been fascinated by this kind of explosive weapon. Every day, he wiped the barrel of the gun, and whenever he had time, he would go to the city wall. He even used his medical ability as a bargaining chip to get a special gun from His Highness Roland. It's all because His Highness said that a long-barreled shotgun is the standard equipment for hunters. Nana thought if my mother was still here he would not go out all day. "Breakfast is here." Ada put 2 steaming plates in front of Nana. "Fried eggs and white bread, eat it while it's hot." "Thank you." Breakfast should have been prepared before her father went out. In order to prevent it from getting cold, she put it in hot water to keep it warm. Only the careful Aunt Ada would do this. If he let his father take care of him, he would definitely be eating frozen eggs. Love go little say Nana could not help but sigh. It would be great if she could marry her father. But the little girl also knew that this hope was unlikely to come true. Ada was a family servant, but her father was now a noble in Border Town. According to her knowledge, it was difficult for nobles and ordinary people to get together. After finishing the bread and eggs, Nana wiped her mouth and shouted, "I'm going to the hospital." "Okay." Ada put down the broom in her hand and sent her to the door. She squatted down and tied the scarf for her. "Be careful on the road, Miss Pine." And Nana went out of the door, welcoming the snow. This was her daily routine. She would leave home in the morning and go to the hospital. If there were any injured, she would help them. If not, she would use animals to practice her abilities. At noon, she returned to the castle to have lunch with His Highness Roland. In the afternoon, She continued to stay in the medical center until the evening when she returned to her residence. She was the only witch who did not live in the castle. Although waiting in the medical center was a little boring, she persevered in order to let the injured get treatment as soon as possible. Another thing that supported her was the smiles and enthusiasm of the townspeople. Lady Nana, good morning. Miss Angel, did you go to the hospital again? The weather is not good today. Pay attention to your health. Have you had your breakfast, Miss Pine? I just cooked some hot oatmeal. Come and have a bowl. Walking on the road, such greetings came one after another. Compared to the situation a year ago, it was a completely different situation. Her sisters all said that she was now the most popular witch in Border Town. Even Anna couldn't be compared to her. Nana did not care who was more popular. She simply liked the current atmosphere. Every townspeople who had been treated by her would greet her warmly, which filled her heart with a sense of achievement. Sister Anna was right, Nana thought. Only by being strong enough to face prejudice can I change. When she arrived at the medical center, a soldier of the First Army who was guarding the door saluted her respectfully. Hello, Miss Nana. Good morning. Have any injured people been sent here? Not at the moment, the soldier replied. But your friend has come. Friend. She was slightly startled. Has Anna come to see me? Thinking of this, Nana ran up to the second floor. When she opened the door, she saw Mystery Moon, Hummingbird, and Lily lying by the table, bored to death. When they saw her, they immediately got up and surrounded her. You. Are you pleasantly surprised? We specially came to play with you. Mystery Moon raised her hand and shouted. Because Mystery Moon said that since we have nothing to do in the castle, we might as well come out for a walk, Hummingbird added. You're very free, yes, but I'm not idle at all. There are so many small insect samples to observe, Lily, who was walking at the back, complained. And Miss Nana should be very busy. Do you think she's like you? Really? Yesterday I saw you dozing off in front of the microscope. It was obvious that you were very impatient, Mystery Moon shrugged. No. It turned out that it was not Anna. Nana was slightly disappointed, but she quickly recovered. Sister Anna was now the busiest person by His Highness' side. Naturally, it was impossible for her to accompany her as often as before. This could not be helped. No, I'm also very idle, she smiled. Thank you. Ahem. Since you said so, I'll stay with you. Lily tilted her head. It's no big deal to leave the insects for tomorrow's observation. What are we going to play? Hummingbird asked. Do you still need to ask? Mystery Moon took out a deck of cards. Of course it's this. Hey, landlord is very interesting, but only 3 people can play. No, it's not fighting the landlord. She shook her head mysteriously. It's a new game. For people can play together to see who can play faster. I just learned it from Andrea yesterday. The Sleeping Island Poker Trio. Lily put her hand on her forehead. Chapter 406. Genius 1 second. Remember, if you want to go? The internet provides you with wonderful novels to read. I envy Nana. Mystery Moon wiped her wet hair and put her face in front of Lily, who was sitting at the desk. Oh, the latter replied without turning her head. Aren't you going to ask me why I envy her? You're going to say it soon anyway. Lily curled her lips. Damn it, Mystery Moon muttered, but finally couldn't help but say. Didn't you see how the soldiers guarding the hospital and the nearby townspeople treated her? I saw it. Hello, Lady Nana. Miss Angel, are you leaving? Miss Pine, this is the wheat cake I made myself. I also want to be treated like this. Mystery Moon put her face on Lily's cheek, but was then ruthlessly pushed away. That was exchanged with her ability, Lily said calmly. Didn't you notice that after the arrival of the months of the demons, she stayed in the hospital almost every day, waiting to treat the wounded? Half of the town's original residents have received her help, and the rest are basically the families of the recipients. You're exaggerating. No. Lily sighed and put down the book in her hand. Although not everyone will go up to the city wall to fight against the demonic beasts, getting injured is a normal thing for the town's residents. Miners will get their toes smashed by or kiln workers will get scalded. And even more so for the apprentices in the steam engine factory and chemical laboratory. She paused. His Highness once told me that Nana and I are the cornerstones of Border Town's medical care. One of us is in charge of internal affairs, while the other is in charge of external affairs, so that everyone can still maintain high-intensity work in the absence of a safety system. But in fact, except for epidemic prevention for the new refugees, I have done nothing else. So you also envy her, just like me. Mystery Moon unyieldingly came closer. I don't, she said loudly. And stay away from me, you're disturbing my reading. Oh. Mystery Moon shrank her head. But I really envy her. Then learn from Nana. Take the initiative to help every townspeople until they know you and are familiar with you. Naturally, people will say hello to you wherever you go. Lily shrugged. But I don't have her ability, Mystery Moon said dejectedly. If you don't have the ability, then you have to rely on your physical strength, Lily sneered. Anyway, in the Witch Cooperation Association camp, you also did the same. You despicable. When she went back to bed, Mystery Moon was still upset. Although she knew what Roland had said was right, she still felt that she was inferior in the Witch Union. But she didn't want to continue like this. She had finally found an ideal place to settle down, and doing nothing all day made her feel uneasy. After a sleepless night, the next day, Mystery Moon knocked on the door of Roland's office with dark circles under her eyes. What's wrong? The prince asked in surprise. Were you bullied? By Lily? No, it's nothing. She leaned over to Roland's table. Your Royal Highness, didn't you say that I have great potential? Why haven't my abilities changed? Can't I evolve if I don't understand natural science theoretical basis? So that's how it is. The other party couldn't help but laugh out loud. Actually, I've been thinking about this too. What's the problem? Didn't Agatha say that more than 400 years ago, even though the Union witches lacked a systematic understanding of the world, they could still awaken to a higher level? In addition to continuous practice as a foundation, the rest was an epiphany. This could be triggered by observing real phenomena, or it could be an accidental inspiration. Roland said, but the awakening caused by this is obviously not as good as the understanding and evolution after systematic learning. Agatha's magic power is the proof. Not only is she the lowest among the evolved witches, but she's even worse than some ordinary witches, such as Sylvie and Andrea. It doesn't matter, as long as I can evolve. Mystery Moon's eyes lit up. Have you thought of a way? It's not guaranteed to succeed. The prince spread out his hands and said, just take it as a try. What do you think of magnetic force? It's a force produced by a magnetic field on a magnet and an electric current. The directional movement of electrons produces magnetic force. This is the original words in the book. He laughed. You've memorized it quite well, but I guess you don't understand the content at all. After a moment of hesitation, Mystery Moon nodded. You've seen the use of iron powder to simulate magnetic lines of force, and you know the direction of magnetic force. You've also seen a direct current generator. So I think you may not be able to quickly cut magnetic lines in a closed circuit, but you can change the magnetic field you form, and then you can personally experience the change from magnetism to electricity. I don't quite understand. The essence of magnetism to electricity is the change of magnetic flux in a closed circuit. If you want to change the magnetic flux in a constant magnetic field, you can only achieve it by changing the area. In other words, you have to cut the magnetic induction lines. The prince drew a diagram on the paper. What if the area is constant? Then you have to change the magnetic field. If the magnetic field changes, it's equivalent to the magnetic flux changes. Mystery Moon opened her mouth, but found that she didn't understand a single word. His Royal Highness laughed. It doesn't matter if you don't understand. You just have to follow the following method. Quickly release and restrain your own magnetic force, instead of continuously using your ability. And then? Mystery Moon waited for a while, but found that he didn't continue. That's all. He shook his head. Just this step. Huh. As long as I keep releasing magnetic force? That's right. If possible, it's best to change the direction of the magnetic field lines. For example, from your left hand to your right hand. The prince laughed. You can practice this method first. I'll prepare a little toy for you. When you master this method, you'll naturally understand its meaning. 2 days later, Mystery Moon received the so-called little toy from His Royal Highness. It was a square frame made of copper wire, the top of which was connected to a transparent spherical glass, less than half the size of a fist. If one looked closely, one could see that the copper wire was broken in the sphere and was connected by a much smaller metal wire. In addition, there was also a manual. Hold both ends of the square frame with both hands to practice your ability. Note: remember to close the curtains and hide the stone of light. What kind of game is this? She scratched her head and finally obediently followed the instructions on the manual. Anyway, it was all practice, so she would just pretend that it didn't exist. It wasn't difficult to quickly release and restrain the ability, but changing the direction of the magnetic force was a big headache for Mystery Moon. After all, magnetic force was like a natural part of her. At first, it was as if she had to take turns to breathe through her 2 nostrils. Although she had said goodbye to poker these 2 days and practiced this skill all day, she could only maintain it for a short period of time. She took a deep breath and mobilized the magic in her body. At first, she didn't feel anything different, but soon Mystery Moon saw a red light. The metal wire in the glass ball turned into a thin orange-red line, and then the light became stronger and stronger. In the blink of an eye, it was so dazzling that Mystery Moon couldn't believe her eyes. The dark room was unexpectedly illuminated by a soft light that she had never seen before, which was far purer than a candle. Until with a soft pop sound, the red light dissipated and everything returned to darkness. She still hadn't come to her senses. Chapter 407. Genius 1 Second. Remember Love Yogo? The internet provides you with wonderful novels to read. The next morning, Mystery Moon hurriedly ran into the office, the dark circles under her eyes widening. Why did the glass light up? After that, no matter how I used my ability, it didn't respond. As soon as she opened the door, she couldn't wait to shout. You did it so quickly? His Royal Highness looked a little surprised. He put down the quill and took the small toy from Mystery Moon's hands. I thought it would take you 2 or 3 days. Mystery Moon stood on tiptoe, rested her chin on the edge of the table, and asked while blinking, What is the light? It's an electric light, His Royal Highness laughed. You release thunder from the sky. Thunder? Thunder? She couldn't help but repeat in a low voice, and then shook her head. But it doesn't look like it at all. The light is orange-red, and it continues to shine. Thunder flashes and then disappears. Thunder ignites the filament, so that it continuously emits light. The prince pinched the glass ball and spun it twice, then took it off. It doesn't matter if you don't understand, I will let you see real electricity. Mystery Moon's eyes widened, staring at his every move, for fear of missing something. After he pulled the 2 copper wires closer, he twisted the glass ball back. Well, continue to practice. That's it. She took the wire frame, feeling very disappointed. Yes, the prince covered his mouth. Remember to close the curtains during this practice. When Mystery Moon returned to the bedroom, Lily was sitting on the bed, reading the book, Natural Science Theoretical Foundation. Why did you get up so early today? She said with a look of surprise. Since you're up, help me bring back breakfast. I want fried eggs and bread, not oatmeal. No, I won't bring breakfast for a traitor. Mystery Moon snorted, reached out and closed the thick French curtains. The room suddenly became dark. Hey, what are you going to do? Lily frowned. Practice my ability. She sat on the floor, closed the curtains, put away the glowing stone. This is His Royal Highness' request. Okay, the little girl rolled her eyes. I'll go to the hall to read. You can't. Mystery Moon shouted. Why? Lily glared at her. I can't read now, and I'm hungry. Am I supposed to stay here with you? Mystery Moon choked. Then I'll bring you breakfast. Can you stay here? Why? Said Lily with interest. Are you afraid of the dark? Of course not. She puffed up her cheeks and muttered after a while. I just want someone to accompany me. She wanted others to see her progress. She wanted others to be amazed by her ability. If she failed, she also wanted someone to comfort her. However, she would never say these words to Lily. "All right, judging from your pitiful tone, I'll reluctantly promise you this once." The latter yawned. "Breakfast, hurry up." After running an errand, Mystery Moon was finally ready to practice. "What are you going to do?" Lily asked while chewing the egg. "Are you going to give magnetism to the thing in your hand?" "No, I want to quickly change the magnetic force in my hands. His Highness said that we can see thunder this way." Lily couldn't help but be stunned. "Thunder? Well, I'm starting." "Wait," the little girl shouted and moved her body toward the door. "Now you can use your ability." Mystery Moon let out a long breath and operated her magic according to the previous practice. If this scene happened in the camp of the Witch Cooperation Association, her mentor Kara would definitely come and scold her. But in order to make it easier for her to practice, His Highness deliberately replaced all the iron utensils in the bedroom, including the iron nails, with copper products. Because of what she had experienced in Border Town, she was even more unwilling to accept her own inaction. Pictures emerged in her mind one by one, like a horse lantern. This time, she found that she was very quickly in the right state. The magic jumped between her hands, faster and faster, and the intensity was constantly increasing. Then Mystery Moon saw the electric light. Like a blue ghost appearing in the clouds, the light appeared briefly and disappeared in an instant, but at that moment, she clearly saw the trajectory of the electric light. It was like a small arc, jumping from one end of the copper wire to the other, and at the same time, it made a slight crackling sound. But this was far from the end. Then the second one, the third one. She was surprised to find that every time the magnetic force changed, she could see the striking electric light jumping up, and the track also corresponded with it, making the same change. As the direction of the magnetic force quickly changed, a blue and white bridge gradually appeared between the two copper wires. "What is this?" Lily, who was standing in the distance, could not help but stare. Compared with the orange light yesterday, this electric light was insignificant, but it made Mystery Moon's heart tremble. For the first time, she saw her own ability with her own eyes. Compared with the invisible magnetic force lines, the rhythm and direction of the electric arc were completely under her control. This was indeed the thunder that she had created. Electricity generates magnetism, and magnetism generates electricity. So this is how it works. She felt the power in her body become clear. Mystery Moon stood up, put the metal frame on the table, and slowly loosened her hands. The magic power subsided, but the two ends of the copper wire were still shining, and from a distance, they looked like stars in the night. She now had a deeper understanding of the words. In other words, electricity was magnetism, and magnetism was electricity. Roland bit the quill in his mouth and rubbed his sore neck. "Do you need my help?" Nightingale's voice came into his ears. "Ah, thank you." She gently nodded, and then a pair of white hands put on his shoulders, and the strength was just right. Roland slightly closed his eyes, enjoying this moment of peace. For the town's first law, which was also the basic law that would become the main law in the future, he had woken up even earlier than his personal guards in the past 3 days. He had only finished writing it today. Because he knew nothing about the law, he could only rely on his own understanding of the system to put together a short dozen or so articles in plain words, which added up to less than 2 pages. But it already contained the ideas of the new world. Completely different from the ancient feudal system, he believed that this law, together with his territory, would promote the new system to the whole continent. With it as the foundation, the new kingdom would inevitably radiate a different brilliance. "Your Highness." The office door was suddenly pushed open, and Mystery Moon ran in, holding the copper wire frame. "I finally understand." Roland opened his eyes and saw that Mystery Moon put the little toy on the desk, and then let go of her hands. "Look." She clearly did not touch the wire frame, but the arc of light still existed at the broken copper wire. Looking at this incredible scene, Roland could not help but open his mouth, and the quill slipped from the corner of his mouth and fell to the ground. Chapter 408. What did he see? A system that was independent of external energy supply, but still generated electricity on its own. Considering that Mystery Moon's ability was an enchantment type, The answer was obvious. She had given a brand new feature to the metal frame, which was to use magic power as a source of energy. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. How did you do it? Roland asked in amazement. You said that creating thunder and lightning requires a change in magnetic force, so I tried to attach the changing magnetic force to the copper wire, and the result is like this. Mystery Moon answered carefully, her eyes full of expectation. So that's how it is. The prince thought. Electricity and magnetism are interrelated, but they are inseparable. I can't help but think, since my ability can make objects magnetic, can I also make them generate thunder and lightning? So that's how it is. The prince thought. Electric current can indeed generate a magnetic field, but a magnetic field can't generate electric current unconditionally. The latter must act on a closed coil, and at the same time, there must be a change in the magnetic flux. Whether it is changing the magnetic area or the magnetic force, external energy is needed to achieve it. Mystery Moon's new ability replaced this part, making the magnetic force change automatically, without external interference. In the past, Roland would definitely think that this was a perpetual motion model, but now he understood that the witch's ability could not be measured by common sense, and the magnetic force of enchantment did not necessarily come from the magnetic poles, just like black fire was not fire. These were all the effects of magic power. The only thing he was curious about was, has Mystery Moon ever noticed the magnetic force change of enchanted objects before? When Roland asked this question, she nodded at first, but soon shook her head and said, when I was in the Witch Cooperation Association, I also thought of changing the magnetic force of objects at will. When not in use, I can reduce the magnetic force to avoid causing trouble to other sisters. But it seems to be useless. The magnetic force of objects is always maintained at a fixed size. I thought it was impossible, so I didn't try it again. Sure enough, Roland turned to Nightingale and asked, the form of her magic power. It has condensed. Nightingale emerged from the mist and said with a smile, like a surging blue wave. Mystery Moon's voice suddenly became excited. Is it true that I? That's right, your ability has evolved, Roland affirmed. Without a long period of unremitting practice, it's impossible to understand the key to advancement so quickly. You've performed very well. From today onwards, you will be the 6th witch in the Witch Union to gain an evolved ability. Congratulations. Nightingale smiled as she walked over and patted her head. Then can I do more for your highness now? Mystery Moon asked, her eyes sparkling. Yeah, too many to count, Roland said with a smirk. As I said before, your potential is limitless. But take a good rest first. Your dark eye circles are almost as big as a fist. Let me test your abilities in the afternoon. She nodded vigorously. After Mystery Moon left the office, Nightingale immediately closed the door and came over. Instead of returning to the table or the floor-to-ceiling window as usual, she flashed close to Roland, pressed his shoulders excitedly, and bent down. Her pale blonde hair fell on his cheeks, making him feel slightly itchy. Looking at her watery eyes and soft red lips, Roland's heart suddenly beat several times faster. What's going on? Does she want to do it here? But it's still daytime. Tell me the method. Nightingale's words stunned the prince. Wait. The story seems to be developing differently from what I thought. What method? You didn't need to understand the theoretical basis of natural science to find a way to evolve, she said excitedly. With Mystery Moon's exam results, it's impossible for her to understand the content of the book, but you still helped her evolve a new ability. What should I do? Do I also need to practice with a small toy? Ugh, so it's about evolution. This request is really regrettable, isn't it? It should be a relief. Roland cleared his throat and collected his thoughts. I'm afraid that it'll be very difficult for you to achieve a breakthrough in your ability through epiphany. Why? According to Agatha, it's possible to trigger evolution by witnessing phenomena related to the ability in reality. Your mist is so incredible that I don't know its specific principles, let alone guide you to understand it, Roland explained. If you want to condense magic power, I'm afraid there's only one way to go, which is to master all the knowledge of nature and physics, and advanced mathematics is also a skill that you must be familiar with. Nightingale's expression immediately collapsed. She walked to the recliner and leaned softly against the back, as if her body had been hollowed out. After lunch, Roland spent half a day to conduct a comprehensive test of Mystery Moon's new ability. He named this ability Indefinite Magnetism. Like the previous Magnetic Bestowal ability, it could be attached to any object and produce periodic changes according to the magic power injected during the enchantment. But for insulators, there was almost no electric current effect. In addition, her magic power was also the lowest among the evolved witches. She could only light up 2 magic stones on the sigil of God's will, which was half less than Maggie's. Moreover, the enchantment ability had a very high demand on magic power. The greater the upper limit of the change of the magnetic force, the longer the duration, and the more amazing the magic power required. After a series of tests, he found that Mystery Moon's new ability was stable as a battery, but it was far from enough to drive a large motor and reach the power of an existing steam engine. He used the DC motor, which was originally assembled for water electrolysis, to transform it into an electric motor for the test, and the result was quite bad. Mystery Moon consumed all her magic power to enchant the motor rotor, but it could only run for half a day, which almost negated its practical value as a source of power. However, Roland did not disclose this to Mystery Moon. Instead, he encouraged her to continue to practice her new ability, and not to fall behind in her studies. For her, evolution was not easy, and any bad news might make her depressed. Fortunately, ability evolution was not a one-time deal. As long as Mystery Moon could make another breakthrough through systematic learning, there was still a chance to make up for the magic power she lacked. In addition, Roland also thought of the method of making the Stone of Light with the help of many people, which Agatha had mentioned. If there was a witch who could control or transfer magic power, they could also circumvent the limitation of Mystery Moon's own power. In the evening, he found Tilly Wimbledon, a magic control-type auxiliary witch. After listening to the prince's description, she pondered for a moment. No one on Sleeping Island has such an ability. Is that so? Roland could not help but sigh. It seemed that Mystery Moon could only rely on her own efforts to improve. However, Tilly's next words made his expression change. But I know where you can find such a witch. Chapter 409. Could it be that she didn't follow you to Sleeping Island? The prince soon realized what Princess Tilly meant. Indeed. Princess Tilly shook her head helplessly. Her name is Spearpassy. Her ability is Magic Channel, which can connect the magic power of several witches. In other words, the witches connected to the channel can temporarily borrow the magic power of others while the channel is active. That should be enough to meet your requirements. She paused. She lives in Fallen Dragon Ridge. Since you know so clearly, you must have contacted this witch. Roland was puzzled. Why did she stay there, even at the risk of being arrested by the church? Tilly was silent for a moment before she answered. Because she's both a Marquis and the Lord of Fallen Dragon Ridge. Lord? He was stunned. A witch. That's right. Her father, Old Parsi, the previous lord, passed his title and territory to her instead of his second or third son. Because of her high status, Spear can hide her identity well, and live a much better life than ordinary witches. Tilly said slowly, during the Great Migration, she took the initiative to come to my door and offer help. That's how I was able to gather the witches in the central and southern towns of the kingdom so quickly. Took the initiative to come to my door. Roland immediately sensed something unusual. Wait. She doesn't intend to take in her compatriots? No. Tilly shook her head. Not only that, she also wants these witches to leave their territory as soon as possible to avoid being persecuted by the church. For Spear, the position of Lord is obviously much more important. If the church found out that the Lord was sheltering witches, the position would undoubtedly become precarious. After all, Fallen Dragon Ridge was not a desolate border town. There were local churches and resident priests, and the area of influence of the believers was much larger than that of the western region. Although Roland knew this, he was still surprised by her choice. If the local witches are caught, does she I asked her the same question, Tilly said regretfully. Spearpassy told me bluntly that if they were caught by the people, she would find a way to replace the witches in the prison with other prisoners and smuggle them out of the country. But if they were caught by the Judgment Army or the church, she would basically choose to sit back and do nothing. So, in order to solve the hidden danger of the witches, he took the initiative to contact Princess Tilly. It was probably because of this that Tilly did not consider settling down in Fallen Dragon Ridge. Instead, she took the risk to cross the strait and go to the strange fjords. Thinking of this, Roland frowned. Do you think I can persuade her to go to Border Town? There's not much hope, but you can try. Tilly spread out her hands. I'm just telling you that there is such a witch, but I can't guarantee that she will come. Roland heaved a long sigh. I'll send a messenger to talk to her first. There was no doubt that Nightingale was the most suitable person to be the messenger. She was able to sneak into the castle without being noticed, and she was also able to detect lies. As long as she showed that she was not hostile, the other party probably wouldn't take any drastic actions. It would take 5 or 6 days to travel from Border Town to Fallen Dragon Ridge by boat, but it would only take half a day for Maggie to fly by air. With the help of lightning, the journey would not be too dangerous. The 3 witches were the most mobile combination in the Witch Union. Now that they had guns, they could attack and defend at the same time. After thinking for a while, Roland had an idea. Although the success rate of persuading the Marquis was close to 0, it was necessary to investigate the situation in the Marquis's territory. Fallen Dragon Ridge was the main road to the southernmost region, which was within the scope of his spring offensive plan. I heard that another witch in the castle has evolved. Tilly suddenly changed the topic. Ah, are you talking about Mystery Moon? She has indeed condensed her magic power. Roland nodded and roughly described the process of her evolution. However, using the ancient witches' methods to promote the evolution isn't ideal for the improvement of magic power. If you want to be like Anna, you still have to learn the basic knowledge honestly. But this can also be regarded as a way to improve the ability, Tilly said with great interest. And in the content you just mentioned, there is one point that I am very concerned about. Ability is the concrete manifestation of magic power, not a natural phenomenon. How should I understand this sentence? This is also my personal speculation. He picked up the cup and took a sip of hot tea. Whether it is Anna's Heartfire or Blackfire, there is no corresponding example in nature. It is not difficult to understand that they are the embodiment of magic power. But what about the ordinary flames before the evolution? So I assume that from the beginning, they are all composed of magic power, a reflection of the heat in the brain, and with the gradual deepening of understanding, the image of heat is constantly changing. This coincides with Agatha's experience. Many witches have similar abilities before they evolve because they mostly see the same natural phenomenon. But after the High Awakening, the witches' abilities will become completely different, which is caused by the huge difference in everyone's cognition. It sounds reasonable, Tilly said noncommittally. But according to this, if witches of the same kind have the same understanding of things, they will still be very close to each other when evolving new abilities, right? Something like that, provided that their ability to understand is exactly the same. Roland still had a thought that he didn't say, and that was, to what extent could magic power evolve in the end? Since it formed the basis of all kinds of abilities, it fully showed that it had a fundamental nature and versatility. If there was an omniscient and omnipotent witch, wouldn't she be able to display all of her abilities at will? You came from a world without magic power? Tilly suddenly asked. Pfdash, the prince almost spat out all the tea in his mouth. He wiped the corner of his mouth and asked, what are you talking about? In the past month, I have read through all the books you wrote, and I always felt that something was wrong. Princess Lannister looked straight into his eyes. It was not until what you said just now that I finally understood what the problem was. You have completely excluded magic power from nature. Whether it is natural science theoretical foundation, or elementary physics, there is no mention of magic power at all. You said that the effect of magic power is a phenomenon that does not exist in nature, but magic power itself is a part of nature. Roland suddenly froze. He suddenly realized that he had completely forgotten that she lived in a world where magic power naturally existed, not only Tilly Wimbledon, but also Prince Roland when he was alive. But he had put magic power on the opposite side of natural phenomena, and he was used to it. Should I blame this careless mistake on the sudden extra memory? This time, I'm afraid it won't work. If Prince Roland's own knowledge was shallow, it would make sense that he copied the contents of these books exactly according to the content in his memory. But why does he even believe in this part of the memory, and subconsciously separate magic power? Can he still swear that this is the memory of Prince Roland as the dominant one? Roland felt a little thirsty. Chapter 410. He did not expect that the other party's question was actually a trap for him, and the source of this trap was already buried when he was writing all kinds of books. At Chinese Northwestern, it was just that when an average person came into contact with such a huge and complex information for the first time, it was extremely difficult to understand, and it was impossible to notice the flaws. As a natural science that studied the nature of everything in the world, it was absolutely inconceivable that the word magic power was not mentioned from the beginning to the end. And Roland himself had completely forgotten the memory of Prince Roland, except for the first month of his transmigration when he consciously imitated Prince Roland. After that he no longer cared about it. The minister did not dare to question him, and he did not need to hide himself in front of the witches, so he became more and more unscrupulous. But Tilly was not an ordinary witch. In addition to being the sister of Prince Roland, she was also an extraordinary. Not only did she read all the books in a short time, but she also keenly noticed this abnormality, and the clarity of her logical thinking was no less than that of a modern person who had received universal education. Not only that, but she also used questions to guide his opinion, and the two sides confirmed each other, making it almost impossible for him to refute. A big crisis. Roland's brain was spinning rapidly, but he could not think of any feasible response. For someone who could see this, any far-fetched explanation would only increase the other party's doubts, and a lie needed more lies to cover up, and the loopholes would only increase. In the midst of the awkward silence, Tilly spoke again, and this time her voice was much slower. You don't need to rush to tell me the answer, it's already late. I'll go back to the witch house first. You should also rest early, Your Highness. Ah yes. Roland stared at the gray-haired woman, not knowing what she was thinking about in the end. And for a moment he even forgot to get up to see her off. When Tilly walked to the door of the office, she stopped and looked back at him. Can I trust you? In the past, Roland would not hesitate to pat his chest and say yes, but at this time, he found that he could not easily say yes, and finally just slowly nodded. After the door was closed, Nightingale clicked her tongue in wonder and said, "She left just like that. Why do you look so regretful?" Roland glared at her. "I feel like she was so close to knowing your true background." Nightingale stuck out her tongue carelessly. Why didn't she ask more questions? Because she didn't want to end up not even being able to be friends. The prince sighed. What? No. It's nothing. Roland leaned against the back of his chair and felt a slight chill on his back. Tilly's performance could be said to be impeccable. She did not question him too much. As an ally of Sleeping Island, Border Town was undoubtedly the most powerful partner. In the face of a formidable enemy, allies were more important than the truth of identity. It would not be good news for the witches of Sleeping Island if the alliance broke down because of this issue. That was why Tilly chose to leave after raising her question, giving herself some buffer time. However, this didn't mean that she didn't need an answer. If she kept dragging things out, she would lose the trust of the other party when the threat of the enemy was eliminated. Now that she had put down this chess piece, it was time for him to respond. But Roland could not reveal the real information to Tilly, at least not now. Anna and Nightingale were not a big problem. They had known him from the beginning. But Tilly was Prince Roland's sister after all. Before he found out what kind of thoughts she had about Prince Roland, he had to bury this information in the bottom of his heart. Shaking his head and putting these annoying things aside, Roland looked at Nightingale and said, "You heard the conversation just now. I plan to let you, Maggie, and Lightning inquire about the situation. What do you think?" "Of course, no problem, Your Highness." It's not as simple as a conversation. To be honest, I'm a little worried about you, he said in a slow voice. Oh, what do you mean worried? Nightingale's voice suddenly became a little stiff. I'm fine, even if I have to kidnap her and bring her here. That's exactly what I'm worried about. Roland knocked on the table and said, What do you mean kidnap her and bring her here? I'm afraid she'll tear us apart. Listen, you can't do anything stupid this time. Find out the situation first, and then find a chance to meet Spear Passy. It's okay if she refuses, but don't threaten her. As a witch, she's not a stranger to you. That's it? She said disappointedly. That's all about witches. Roland curled his lips. In addition, you need to cooperate with Lightning to record the surrounding environment of Fallen Dragon Ridge, the city defense facilities, patrols and garrison arrangements, and then return as soon as possible. Nightingale mumbled a response. Last but not least. He paused. Pay attention to your own safety. That's the most important thing. Here, another glass of ale. Hey, is the oatmeal not ready yet? Coming. Sorry to keep you waiting. Otto Luashi walked into the tavern named Underground Trumpeter, and was immediately surrounded by the noise. The roaring fire dispelled the chill, and the dull smell of sour and body odor hit his face, making him frown slightly. As a noble, Otto rarely stepped into cheap civilian places, and he was not used to drinking close to people. If it were not for his appointment with Rat, he would never visit this alley tavern in the outer city. According to the rules of this place, he soon found his target. A skinny man wearing a hood was sitting in a corner of the tavern. There was no candle on the table, and half of his body was hidden in the darkness. Beside his hand was a small piece of white bone. Otto walked to the man and sat down. To Skeleton Fingers. You don't have any wine. What are you going to offer? Something to measure everything with, he said the code word. The man shrugged. Just call me Hood. I heard that you're here to ask for information? Otto nodded. While Timothy did not reply for a long time, he had not been idle. Instead, he had been asking around for information about the rebel king. The fact that the king could still firmly occupy the western region after half a year after his ascension to the throne, and that Timothy could not do anything about it showed that the rebel king was a force to be reckoned with. To get as much information as possible, dealing with Rat was the fastest way. This was the 6th Rat he had made an appointment with. Otto was shocked by the information he had received so far. The legendary rebel king, Roland Wimbledon, the 4th son of Wimbledon III, not only did not show any signs of decadence, but even issued a challenge to the new king, claiming that he would take the initiative to overthrow Timothy sooner or later. Moreover, Timothy had not only said so, but had also really done so. Although Timothy had tried his best to conceal the news, Otto had still noticed the strangeness of the collapse of King City's buildings. If this news was true, then the value of forming an alliance with Timothy would be very questionable. He had to get to the bottom of this to prevent the Kingdom of Dawn from falling into trouble. That's right, Otto Luashi said in a low voice. I want to know what the loud noise and collapse of the palace in King's City were about 3 months ago. Chapter 411. You've found the right person. Hood grinned. His voice was a little hoarse, making it hard to tell whether he was 21 or 21. 21? Although I live in the outer city, I happened to be near the palace on the day of the incident. When the roar sounded, I ran to the gate of the palace wall. You probably don't know how terrifying that sound was. If thunder exploded on the ground, it would be nothing more than that. The windows of the surrounding houses, whether made of paper or glass, were all destroyed by an invisible force. Some people were even scared to death by the sudden sound. Every rat claimed that he happened to be nearby and witnessed the whole incident, but after a comparison, everyone's story was different. Alright, let's not talk about these meaningless things anymore. How was it born? Otto Luashi interrupted. Is this incident really related to Prince Roland Wimbledon? Hood coughed twice and stretched out his right hand. Of course I can tell you, but you need to measure everything, right? Otto untied his waist pouch. How much? The so-called measure of everything was just another name for the golden dragon. Only a group like the rats liked to set up simple signals or passwords to show off their mysteriousness. They had no standards at all. Hood gestured with his hand. He took out 2 golden dragons and put them in Hood's hand. This is not a cheap fee. I hope your information is worth it. Of course, this is related to the credibility of skeleton fingers. Hood smiled greedily and put the golden dragon in his arms. The credibility of the rats was probably as ridiculous as the benevolence of the king. Otto snorted coldly in his heart. Speak. I'll answer your first question first. Probably because of the money, the hooded man's posture was much more relaxed. He took a sip of ale, leaned back in his chair, and pointed at the ceiling. Thunder comes from the sky. What do you mean? Otto frowned. Didn't you ask how the thunder came about? Hood lowered his voice. All thunder comes from the sky, and this time is no exception. I saw with my own eyes before the roar, a white stone floated into the palace. And then what happened next happened. Ridiculous. Are you trying to tell me that a huge rock fell from the sky and destroyed most of the palace? Hee, I'm telling the truth. Otherwise, skeleton fingers wouldn't have assigned this job to me. If you think I'm lying, you can leave now. Hood shrugged. But the fee won't be refunded. Continue. Otto suppressed his displeasure. From the moment the stone appeared to the moment it fell into the palace, it was only a few breaths of time. But I saw it clearly at that time. It wasn't big, nor was it fast. It was impossible for it to smash the Sky Dome Palace. That's why I said it was floating. In addition, at the same time as the loud noise and thick smoke appeared, I also saw rolling flames. The momentum was very threatening, and it was definitely not caused by a collision. Hood smacked his lips. In fact, didn't His Majesty Timothy's final search prove this? He closed the inner city and cleaned it several times, but didn't catch any suspects. Plus, the palace itself is heavily guarded. If the attack didn't come from the sky, where else could it have come from? He took another sip of ale. As for the flames and thick smoke, they were very similar to the phenomenon produced when an alchemy item called snow powder burns, which is why I'm sure it was an attack. By the way, I also know some information about snow powder, but you'll have to pay extra for it, just. No, I don't want to know, Otto interrupted. He had heard a little about this thing from other sources. It was originally a celebratory item, but after modification, it could be used as a weapon. Rats were unlikely to know its specific composition, so he did not need to waste his money on it. Okay, now to answer your second question. Hood spread out his hands indifferently. There's no doubt that this matter has a lot to do with Prince Roland. Why? I don't know when you arrived at King City. Of course, I'm not asking about your background or identity. This is the rule of Blackstreet, so you don't have to answer me. Hood chuckled. What I mean is, if you arrived at King City in early autumn, you'd definitely know one thing. His Majesty sent thousands of troops to attack the western region, but only a few came back alive. Moreover, these defeated soldiers carried the letter that Prince Roland submitted to His Majesty. Since all 6 rats mentioned this, it seemed to be true, but he still had to ask a few more questions. You mean the notice about revenge? It's really sensational. Are you sure it's not a rumor? Most of the letters followed the defeated soldiers into the palace, and the few that came out were basically searched by City Hall. But Skeleton Fingers always surprises customers. In fact, I have a copy of the notice here. Hood held up 5 fingers. Considering that it's a personal letter from Prince Roland, and it's rare, the price will be a little higher. What do you think? Otto Luashi returned to the palace against the cold wind, and Belinda immediately greeted him. Any news? Not much, but I got a letter from Prince Roland. He handed the crumpled note to her, then took off his coat, sat in front of the fireplace, and told her about his investigation in detail. The 6 rats basically gave the same answer to the second question. With this note, the result should be clear. Roland Wimbledon is not as weak as His Majesty said. In fact, it's the opposite. If the Kingdom of Dawn forms an alliance with Timothy, it may not benefit them at all, and they may even make themselves a troublesome enemy. But the rats all gave different answers to the first question, Belinda said with a frown. This proves that the attack was very strange, and almost no one knows how it came about. I'm actually starting to believe the last rat's words. Otto took a sip of hot tea and let out a long sigh. After staying in the cheap tavern for too long, he felt uncomfortable all over. From the sky, Belinda looked at him in surprise. Are you crazy? Of course not. If I hadn't seen this letter, I wouldn't have dared to think in this direction. He's very confident about the time and place of attack. Only by attacking from the sky can he cross the towering city walls and tight defensive lines. And even the well-informed rats don't know about it. He curled his lips. But that's not the point. The point is what we should do next. The threat of the church is imminent. They should stop fighting and unite against the foreign enemy. That's not for us to decide. Otto shook his head. The only thing we can do is to try our best to win over a reliable ally for the Kingdom of Dawn. His Majesty Timothy Wimbledon doesn't seem to be reliable. Do you want to go to the Western region? Belinda was slightly startled. Isn't that place affected by the months of demons and in danger? It's nothing compared to the danger of the kingdom's destruction. After a moment of silence, he made up his mind. You stay here and wait for the new king's reply. I'll go to the Western region alone. Chapter 412. The water vapor condensed into a uniform layer of white mist on the window glass, like a thin gauze curtain. From time to time, the cold wind banged against the window, creating a sharp contrast with the quiet burning of the stove in the room. Scroll sat in front of the long desk in the City Hall office, flipping through thick rolls of documents. The contents of the documents had nothing to do with education, but the statistics of the various departments. Whenever she had time, she would write down these things so that everyone could refer to them. This was also one of her main jobs recently, since the Ministry of Education didn't have much to deal with. After all, the second round of assessment had just ended, and the next round would probably have to wait until next summer. After working for His Highness Roland for half a year, she found that His Highness had a special fondness for data. He liked to convert everything into a long list of precise numbers to describe. Comparison, comparison, and comparison were all words that he often used. Now all the members of the City Hall were infected with this atmosphere. As the population of Border Town increased, the relevant statistics also increased sharply. His Highness entrusted this task to her, and also jokingly called himself Border Town's database. Although it sounded like something like a warehouse, His Highness described it as particularly important. He said that with the database, he could calculate the next year's development and formulate economic and military plans. Even all the future strategies of the territory would be based on data analysis. Lady Scroll. The wooden door of the office was suddenly pushed open, and a woman dressed as an apprentice came in. After saluting, she handed an application form to Scroll. Hello, I am Fuya. Sir Carter of the Ministry of Justice wishes to obtain the information of the fugitives who passed the residency review last week. His Excellency has approved this application. Because the number of times the branch ability could be used was limited, His Highness stipulated that when inquiring about complex data, he must first obtain Barov's consent. As for individual data, he could consult her at any time. Wait a moment. Scroll glanced at the signature on the form, then summoned the Book of Magic, and the corresponding content appeared on the page. Well, give this to Mr. Carter. Thank you. She carefully held the golden book that appeared out of thin air, her expression as if she was hugging a demonic beast. Don't worry. It won't hurt you. Scroll couldn't help but laugh. Most people would show such an expression when they first touched the Book of Magic. You don't have to return the book to me. It will disappear on its own in 4 hours. However, according to the confidentiality rules, you can't give it to anyone other than Carter. Yes, my lord. The other party bowed and left. The moment the door was pushed open, Scroll could see the bustling scene in the hall. The noise instantly poured into the room, but it quickly quieted down as the door was closed. Today was the weekend, which was supposed to be a day of rest, but the City Hall was still as busy as ever. Everyone already knew that Border Town was about to be built, so they worked especially hard. Coupled with the overtime pay that His Royal Highness had proposed, no one was willing to stay at home at this time. Scroll didn't quite understand His Highness's approach. In her opinion, the work of the city hall wasn't that heavy. Compared to the physical exhaustion of the miners and furnace workers, writing documents, statistics, and producing reports didn't require much effort. And these were the main tasks of the city hall. As long as His Royal Highness gave an order, everyone would gladly obey, so there was no need to increase their pay. For most of the nobles, his approach was too lenient. His Royal Highness Roland didn't seem like a real lord. This was Scroll's opinion, but it was such a person who had led everyone to this point, which could be said to be a miracle. She didn't think so because of her respect and trust, but because the data clearly explained everything. Compared to a year ago, only the miners had a stable income in Border Town. Today, the lowest paid miners, furnace workers, and handymen were paid twice as much as before, while some new professions, such as steam plant assemblers and acid plant operators, were paid 8 times as much, and their numbers were still growing. As for the changes in the town itself, there was no need to mention it. If one hadn't lived here all the time, it would be hard for anyone to believe that the current town was the same place as a year ago. Scroll rubbed the handwriting on the document. She couldn't imagine what the territory under His Royal Highness control would look like in the future, but she believed that it would be a road full of hope and surprises. Miss Scroll, the wooden door was pushed open again. And this time it was His Royal Highness' personal guard who came in. His Royal Highness wants to see you. Back on the 3rd floor of the castle, Scroll saw His Royal Highness sorting out the manuscript in his hands. Do you need me to record these things? She pulled back her black hair, which had been messed up by the cold wind, and tied it behind her head, and took the initiative to ask. Yes, in order to write this, I used up at least half of my brain cells. The prince rubbed his neck and muttered some words that were difficult for her to understand. Even if it was common knowledge at that time, I could only make up a rough idea, and some of the formulas had to be derived by myself. Scroll had long been accustomed to this, so she ignored those strange words and curiously picked up the manuscript. She saw that the words on the cover were in an unprecedented orange color, and they were also made up of a string of words, which together meant calculus. After flipping through 2 pages, she gave up the idea of trying to understand the meaning of the title and concentrated on memorizing the contents. Compared to the equations she had learned before, she found that there weren't even numbers in the formulas on the cover, only strange symbols, just like a new set of words. Perhaps only Anna and Tilly would be interested in pondering this kind of thing. By the way, Roland opened his mouth and asked, what's the current per capita income of the residents? The lowest is 10 silver royals per month, and the highest is 40 silver royals, Scroll replied while memorizing the calculus. But to calculate the average, I need to use the Book of Magic, which I've already used today. It doesn't matter, just give me the results the day after tomorrow. Roland waved his hand. I need to use this value to determine the cost of water and heating for the residents. The collective heating project will officially start in a week, and when it's completed, even if it's a long winter, this place will be as warm as spring. A never-winter city that doesn't fear the cold. This is also part of the miracle, she thought. If there's no other task, I can give it to you tomorrow. Tomorrow. I hope you can turn the Book of Magic into a storybook. Roland smiled and shook his head. As long as it's something that Anna hasn't read before. Storybook. Scroll was slightly startled, and then immediately understood. Tomorrow is Miss Anna's. The day of awakening. The prince nodded. Chapter 413. Without the flickering candlelight and the crackling fire. The room was warm and pleasant even if one was only wearing a thin layer of clothing. The luminous stone on the bedside table brightly lit up the room. The stable and warm yellow light reflected on the bed and carpet, adding a wonderful sense of the times to the scene in front of them. Roland sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the occasional hissing sound coming from the heating pipe. He felt as if he were in a dream, as if he was not in the backward era of royalty, nor was he in the modern society where electronic products were everywhere. Instead, he felt as if he was in between his childhood. His impression of that era was the same as the scene now. Everywhere was covered in a dim yellow. Whether it was incandescent lights, movies, or developed photos, they were all filled with the same color. But this part of his memory did not include Anna. Thinking of this, he could not help but look at the girl sitting on the edge of the bed. She was flipping through the storybook in her hands. The hair on her forehead glowed with a golden light, and her long eyelashes fluttered occasionally. The most striking thing about her was her sapphire eyes. Even under the reflection of the magic stone, they were still a clear lake blue. If there was anything different, it would be that the lake was not as calm as it used to be. She alone made the whole scene come alive. Roland could not help but think that Anna was a different color in the scene, and also a mark that distinguished his memory from reality. When he saw her, he realized that everything was real. "What are you looking at?" The prince did not know when, but he found that Anna had put down the book of magic and was looking at him with her head tilted. "Me. Ahem." He subconsciously looked away, but quickly looked back. Yes. Yes. After spending nearly a year together, the two of them were very familiar with each other. Naturally, Roland was no longer as passive as he was in the beginning. Plus, there were only the two of them in the room tonight, so he also relaxed his restrained emotions. The two looked at each other for a while and laughed at the same time. "Do you think that my request is a little willful?" Anna smiled and shook her head. "Everyone is obviously concerned about me, but I rejected them." "You're being too serious," Roland said. They just looked a little surprised at the time. "If Miss Agatha hadn't mentioned those ancient methods, I wouldn't have made this request." She stuck out her tongue. It was rare to see such a playful expression on Anna's face. "But the other sisters will definitely follow suit in the future, and you'll be busy then." Roland smiled helplessly. "I guess their request is probably to eat a few more ice cream buns." Knowing that Anna was about to have her day of awakening, Agatha immediately shared her experience in the holy city of Tequila. According to the research of the Union, when a witch awakened or became an adult, in addition to emptying the magic power in her body to reduce the impact of the backlash, personal emotions were also very important. Positive attitudes such as joy and satisfaction could greatly improve one's resistance, so the Union would even send someone to meet the needs of some outstanding witches when they reached adulthood. When Anna learned about this, she asked Roland to accompany her on her day of awakening. "Thanks to Miss Agatha, I feel very happy now," she said calmly. "I can finally make up for the regret of not being able to see you through your adulthood." Faced with such a serious expression, even Roland felt a little embarrassed. He cleared his throat, took out a thin book tied with a colorful ribbon, and handed it to Anna. "This is a gift for you on the day of awakening." He had written down the knowledge of calculus in advanced mathematics just in time for this day. For witches, the importance of the day of awakening was more important than their birthdays. It could be called a second rebirth. In the past, Roland had always felt that it was difficult to give a gift during the festival, and he had not made any progress until now. After thinking hard, he decided to give the new knowledge to Anna as a gift. Not only was Anna talented in learning, but she was also very interested in these things, so it was not a bad choice. However, after receiving the orange-covered book, she did not open it as she usually did. Instead, she put it aside together with the book of magic. "Thank you. Have you finished reading the storybook?" "Not yet." Anna shook her head gently. "But I want to hear something special." "Special?" Roland was slightly surprised. "Well," she smiled. "Your story, last time. I didn't listen for long before falling asleep. This time, I want to continue listening." Is she referring to the day when we lay on my bed together? Roland pursed his lips. He suddenly had an impulse to tell her his true origin, instead of hiding it. "Do you remember that I said I used to live in a big city? In fact, that city wasn't King's City of Grey Castle." "I know." Ha! Anna's answer surprised him. Because in hindsight, even in the palace of King's City, the things you said couldn't have happened. She grinned. "I'm someone who has read the Chronicles of Grey Castle several times." "Is that so?" Roland hesitated. "I actually..." "Don't say it." Anna stopped him. "You're hesitating, which proves that it's not something that can be easily said, right? Then don't say it. And it's not difficult to guess. I believe I'm not the only one who feels this way. The closer I get to you, the easier it is to feel this. You're different from everyone else." She paused. How about we make a bet? Bet what? Bet how many guesses I can guess, Anna said excitedly. I'll record these guesses in my notebook. When you don't have to worry and can easily say it, then I'll see how many guesses I've guessed correctly. If it's more than half, I win. Roland suddenly remembered a game he used to play when he was a child. Time capsule. You put some words you want to say to the future into cans and take them out after a few years. Although most of these cans were missing, when the last 2 or 3 were found, you would always feel inexplicably touched when you read the words you left years ago. He didn't ask what the bet was. Winning or losing was meaningless between the two of them. She probably mentioned it to comfort him, not to really guess the answer. He had to admit that among all the witches, the one who was closest to his heart and could understand his thoughts was Anna. Well, it's a deal, he nodded. So where did we stop last time? Finishing my studies under the tutor's guidance. Roland smiled. Let's start from here. When the light of dawn shone on the skyline, Anna peacefully passed her first day of awakening since adulthood. Chapter 4:14. The world was gray, whether it was the sky, the ground, or the sea. Although the south-central region of Grey Castle would not be covered by endless snow, it could not escape the influence of the months of demons. The sun could not be seen above their heads, and gray clouds occupied the entire sky. A pale fog rose from the earth, covering the soil, rocks, and jungle, leaving only a black and gray mountain peak, which was exposed from the clouds, winding toward the southern end of the mainland, which was also the target of Nightingale and her team. When flying in the sky with Maggie, she deeply experienced how terrible the cold wind was. Even if she wore the special windproof clothes given to her by His Highness before they set off, the scarf and cuffs could not resist the cold. Especially the ears and fingers, because of the low temperature, they would soon lose feeling, so they had to stop and rest for a while. Therefore, flying at full speed only took half a day, but in the end it was extended to the next day. We're here. Lightning came close to her. Nightingale poked her head out and saw that the ridge under her feet had become much lower, as if it had sunk into the ground. A city built on the mountain faintly appeared in the fog, which should be their goal, Fallen Dragon Ridge. Let's land, she patted Maggie's broad back. Be careful not to let others see you. Ow. Maggie nodded, folded her wings, and glided down. The fog hit them in the face, and soon the 3 people were shrouded in it. Until they landed, Nightingale found that the visibility around them was extremely low, almost 50 steps away. It was difficult to distinguish what was in the distance. This was good news for witches, at least it was not easy to be found. After entering the fog, the world would show its true appearance, so she did not worry about running into the arms of the church's army of judges because of the thick white fog. You can wait for me here, Nightingale said. It shouldn't take long. His Highness asked me to provide security in the air. Lightning shook her head. He also asked me to be responsible for emergency communication, in case you kidnap the target, Coo. Maggie turned back into a fat pigeon, squatting on the little girl's head. His Royal Highness is making a meaningless request again, Nightingale thought helplessly. In that case, let's go. The world turned black and white in an instant. The fog disappeared, or rather, it turned into other forms and could no longer obstruct his observation. Everything in front of him suddenly became clear. The dark city wall appeared 200 meters away, extending out from the side of the mountain like a cover connecting the city and the mountain. Compared to the outer wall of Longsong's stronghold, this stone wall was much shorter, and there were no sentries at the top of the wall. Nightingale walked to the wall, and easily found the entrance formed by the twisted lines. She took a step forward and found herself behind the wall. This city was half the size of a stronghold. Just the part that protruded out of the mountain wall was more like a small town. However, the main body of the Fallen Dragon Ridge was among the rocks, and the Lord's castle was embedded in the mountainside, which could be seen from afar. After confirming that Lightning and Maggie had entered the city, Nightingale went straight to the castle. She was no stranger to this work, and could even be said to be very good at it. When she was coerced and driven by old Guylan, it was a common task to sneak into other noble mansions and castles. Most of these houses had the same structure, and the owners of the mansions always liked to set their rooms in the most central and most spacious positions. At that time, she could not freely pass through the walls, so she could only hide herself, carefully avoid possible traps and God's stones of retaliation, and steal the letters and documents hidden in the cabinets. Now with the fog, it was even easier. The God's stones of retaliation inlaid at the corners of the castle passages showed dark black holes, as eye-catching as the bright moon hanging in the night sky. The hidden traps were also nowhere to hide. Their twisted contours wriggled slowly like earthworms, and she could easily destroy them through the wall. Within the range of her ability, Nightingale could move freely. Walls, doors, and roofs were nothing in her eyes. Walking into the largest room on the top floor, she found her target. Although she had never seen her before, Nightingale immediately recognized that she was the Lord of the Fallen Dragon Ridge, Marchioness Spear Passy, because her body was running with blue magic power, which was also the only color in the world of fog. The Marchioness sat at the desk, the quill in her hand flying up and down, as if she was writing something. She was about 30 years old, with wrinkles at the corners of her eyes. Her silver curly hair and plain robe made her look even older. Nightingale carefully checked the room. There were no God stones of retaliation or traps in the room. The Marchioness' only weapon was a short crossbow hidden in her sleeve. Its structure was exquisite, and it was obvious that it was expensive. After leaving a mark by the window, she gathered the fog and showed herself. "Hello, Marchioness Spear Passy." The sudden voice made the Marchioness tremble. She quickly raised her head and met Nightingale's eyes. Then she quickly calmed down and asked, "Who are you?" Nightingale could not help but think of the scene when she first met Prince Roland. His first reaction was to turn around and run away, and she had to use a dagger to stop him. Now that she thought of it, she could not help but laugh. "My name is Nightingale, and I come from Border Town in the Western region. As you can see, I'm a witch." "I thought so. Except for witches, no one can come uninvited." Spear pretended to be calm, her hand slowly reaching into her sleeve. "Don't you know that you should knock before you come in? Then I'll be greeted by the guards instead of you." Nightingale chuckled. "Don't worry, I don't mean to hurt you. I'm just here to talk to you. So you don't need to use the crossbow in your sleeve." Spear was stunned, and then her face quickly darkened. "You know a lot." She pulled out her hands and crossed them over her chest. "Tell me, why are you here?" "I brought a message from Prince Roland Wimbledon, the Lord of Border Town, the Guardian of the Western Region, and the 4th Prince of Grey Castle." Nightingale bowed slightly. Now he has established a new order in the Western region where witches and ordinary people can live together and work hand in hand. He hopes that you can go and help him. "The 4th Prince." The Marchioness frowned and thought for a moment. The incompetent playboy who is often a laughingstock among the nobles? Her face showed an absurd expression. "Are you kidding? The Lord of Border Town? He's just a rebel who was banished to a remote place." "Timothy is the real usurper," Nightingale corrected. "And it won't be long before he'll be dethroned by Prince Roland. But that's not the point. His Highness hopes to use your magic channel to strengthen the ability of a witch. I wonder if you'd like to go to Border Town?" Chapter 415. Spear Passy was silent for a while before she said, "Is this a threat or an invitation?" "Of course it's an invitation." Nightingale spread out her hands and said, "His Highness doesn't approve of using coercion to order any witch around. In fact, I hate that method too." "Then I refuse," Spear said without hesitation. "If he really needs my help, he can bring the witches to Fallen Dragon Ridge and visit me with noble etiquette. He won't send someone to sneak into my castle. Of course, if it attracts the attention of the church, I can't guarantee the witch's safety." This answer was not out of Nightingale's expectation. In fact, there were only 2 ways to make a stranger agree to a difficult request: coercion and temptation. She didn't want to use the former, and she didn't want to use the latter. Marquis Passy was already the lord of a city, and above her was the realm guardian. His Highness not only didn't want to grant her a title, but also planned to take back all the nobles' power, which was called centralization. So in other words, If she worked for His Highness, her status would be reduced in the eyes of the traditional nobles. As for following Prince Roland to create a new world and fight against the terrible enemies in the battle of divine will, she probably wouldn't believe it even if Roland told her. I see. Nightingale curled her lips and said, Then I'll take my leave. Wait. Spear looked very surprised. That's it? I was responsible for delivering His Highness' message. Now that you know and have given me a reply, the task is naturally completed. She grinned. Otherwise, would you like me to tie you up and bring you back? How do you know my ability is magic channel? The Marquis hesitated. Have you been in contact with the witches who plan to go to the Fjords Islands? You guessed right. The leader of the witches, Lady Tilly Wimbledon, is now in Border Town, fighting against the months of demons with her brother. Nightingale shrugged. His Highness also learned about you from her. They didn't go to the fjords. No, before they went to the fjords, they didn't know that His Highness Roland had already established a foothold in the western region. They didn't contact each other until they settled on Sleeping Island. She gave a brief account of the process of the alliance between the two sides. This time, Lady Tilly went to the western region at his invitation, just like you. Did Prince Roland really establish a coexistence system for witches and ordinary people in his territory? Spear frowned and asked, obviously not believing it. Not only that, but he also drove the church out of his territory, Nightingale said with a smile. Now there are more than 10 witches living in Border Town, and the townspeople are accustomed to their existence. I never lie about this. The Marquis stood up and poured her a cup of tea. Can you tell me more about how he did it? If you want to know. Nightingale turned around, walked back to the table, and sat down. These deeds might not be able to change the Marquis's decision, but it was never a bad thing to get to know each other better. She decided to focus on the establishment of the Witch Union by His Highness, the war with the Duke of Ryan, and the governance after the recovery of Longsong's stronghold, so that the Marquis could roughly understand the situation of witches in Border Town. When His Highness unified Grey Castle in the future, this Witch Marquis would probably not put up much resistance. Just then, there was a sudden rapid knocking sound outside the window. This is... Spear looked at Nightingale in surprise. The latter opened the window, and sure enough, it was Maggie squatting outside. Danger coup. Lightning found something unexpected. Coup. What happened? A team of Judgment Army is coming to the castle. Coup. The pigeon flapped its wings and said, There are at least 20 people. Coup. The church's Judgment Army? Nightingale turned around and frowned. Are they here for you? No. I didn't make an appointment with the priest of the church today. The Marquis also looked very puzzled. Did they discover your whereabouts? It's unlikely. She shook her head. Unless the church has the ability to monitor every bird in the sky. That's strange. Spear muttered. If they're here for me, they shouldn't have sent so many Judgment Army soldiers. This is almost the entire manpower of the fallen Dragon Ridge Church. What are you waiting for? They're about to enter the castle area. A golden figure jumped in from the window and landed lightly beside Nightingale. It was Lightning. Although I don't know the situation, I suggest you hide for a while, Nightingale said in a low voice. Or ask your guards to stop them outside the castle and find out the reason. This is my castle. Where can I hide? Don't worry. Without my permission, they can't come in. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to protect those witches. Spear sighed. But this meeting may have to end here. If you're not in a hurry, I think. Before she could finish, chaotic footsteps came from under the castle. There was even the light sound of swords and knives clashing, which was particularly clear in the castle embedded in the mountain. The Marquis' expression changed. Who let them in? Guards. Spear shouted several names, but no one responded. The footsteps were getting closer and closer. It seems that they're here for you. Nightingale gestured to Lightning, reminding her to leave. It's not too late to leave now. We can protect you. No, I'm not going anywhere. This is my territory. How dare they be so presumptuous? Before he could finish his words, the door was slammed open, and a group of fully armed Judgment warriors came in. They raised their swords and shields and surrounded the Lord. At the same time, Nightingale hid in the mist and retreated to the corner of the wall, where it was convenient to escape and to observe the situation in the room. She noticed that Lightning and Maggie had not left either. The former was poking her head out of the window to spy on the enemies. The latter was squatting on top of the beam, methodically taking care of her wings. These two brats are so reckless. His Highness must discipline them when we get back. She shook her head helplessly and looked at the judgment warriors of the church. Each of them was wearing a god stone of retaliation. The dark black holes overlapped and covered Spear completely. She could only hear the Marquis scolding angrily. "Redwin, are you crazy? How dare you bring them into my castle without permission?" "Of course not, my sister," a man's voice rang out from the crowd. "Father made a mistake, that's why he passed the title to a devil's henchman. I'm just correcting his mistake." Chapter 416. What? What are you talking about? Spear said in disbelief. The devil's minions? This is a blatant false accusation. The priest will decide whether it's a false accusation or not. The man called Redwin said loudly. Father may be deceived by you, but it doesn't mean you can deceive everyone. Soon, the people will know your true colors. Hell is where you belong. Did you make all this up? Spear's tone suddenly turned cold. Or someone else? I think the answer should be the latter. After all, the reason why Father chose me is because you and third brother are too useless. Shut up. Then Nightingale heard a crisp sound and the Marquis's painful groan. Enough. Take her back to the church for trial. Another man said. Before the trial, she's still a noble. Don't be rude. After Spear Parsi was dragged away, the judgment warriors followed her out. Soon, there were only two people left in the room. Because of the god stone of retaliation, Nightingale could not see their faces. She could only tell from their voices that one of them was Redwin, who had talked to the Lord earlier. If she heard it right, this person seemed to be Spear's younger brother. You've done well, Mr. Redwin. Perhaps the next time we meet, I'll have to address you as Earl. Is that all, Lord Rosat? Redwin's tone was mixed with uncontrollable excitement. Can I really inherit the title and become the Lord of Fallen Dragon Ridge? Of course. As long as you follow our agreement, it's even possible, the latter said with a smile. What should I do next? He asked eagerly. Can I move into my sister's room? She can't come out of prison again, right? Spear Parsi will soon be hanged in the square as a witch. This is also the guarantee of our cooperation. The other man pondered for a moment. As for what to do next, I suggest you gather her ministers, knight, and subordinates. Tell them about this, and divide part of the Marquis's rights. Do we have to do this? If everyone can benefit from this incident, your position will be much more stable. This will also facilitate the smooth implementation of our subsequent agreement, Rosat said. If you feel at a loss, I can assign a priest to you. He is very good at handling government affairs. If you have any questions, he can answer them at any time. Then I'll leave it to you, Redwin replied quickly. You'll be a great help to us if you're able to secure your position as the Lord. So the church is naturally duty-bound to help you. The other party laughed out loud. After the two of them left, Nightingale emerged from the mist, followed by Lightning and Maggie. This is troublesome. She looked at the two of them. How did the church find us so coincidentally? Didn't her brother discover her true identity and reveal it to the church? Lightning's eyes lit up. Now we have something to do. You didn't discover it earlier or later, but now. I feel that something is not right, Nightingale said with a frown. No matter what, we can't just watch them execute Spear, Lightning said with her head held high. We must save her and destroy the church. Destroy the church coup. Ever since she defeated the demons, the blonde girl's confidence had swelled, which was not a good sign. Nightingale shook her head. We can't destroy the church for now. They must be involved in this conspiracy. If we eradicate them, Spear can naturally return to her position as Lord. This may be an opportunity for us. As long as we save her quietly, she may agree to return to Border Town with us when she has nowhere else to go. Hey, aren't we going to fight the church? Lightning said disappointedly. Fighting is the last resort. The church outnumbers us and has a large number of God's stones of retaliation. It's very risky to eliminate them quickly. Nightingale thought for a while and said, I'll go to the church first and see if I can figure out what's going on. There was one more thing she didn't say. If they didn't figure out the cause and effect, Spear Passy might associate this trap with His Highness, which must be avoided. What about us? The little girl asked. Just wait for me outside. The Fallen Dragon Ridge Church was located in the outer city. It was small, with a prayer hall, a residence for believers, and a 3-story tower. It was surrounded by walls and had only one entrance. But for Nightingale, these obstacles were not a problem. By evening, after the believers who came to pray had left, she had explored the whole area. Although the number of God's stones of retaliation was several times more than in the castle, it was not difficult to move. There were large God's stones in the hall that could block the magic power of the whole room, as well as some of the aisles. But she could take a detour, or even climb over the floor. Nightingale also found the place where Spear Passy was imprisoned. It was in the basement of the high tower. She didn't seem to be tortured, but she was a little dispirited. She planned to take the Marquis out in the dead of night. After explaining her plan to the two, Nightingale sneaked into the high tower again. This time, she followed a line that did not exist in reality to the top floor, and hid in a luxuriously decorated room. This should be the priest's room. When he came back and faced with the threat of the dagger, he would tell the truth. When the 9 o'clock bell echoed over Fallen Dragon Ridge, the door was pushed open. She quietly pulled out the dagger, but did not move. Judging from the footsteps, there were 2 people. What a surprise! The first one to speak was a woman. I didn't expect Marquis Spear to be a witch. It seems that we have to make some changes to our plan. Your Excellency. The one who answered was Rosad, and his tone was very respectful. Isn't it more convincing if she's a witch? Things are different now. According to the Supreme Pontiff, if there are new witches, they should be handed over to the Holy City as much as possible without being exposed, the woman said. As for the original hanging, let's change it to burning, and replace it with a masked death row prisoner with a similar figure. Yes, Rosad replied. But why did His Holiness set such a troublesome rule? It's not easy to transport a witch to Hermes. I don't know, but I heard that it's just a return to tradition. Return to tradition? You don't need to know too much. Just focus on what you need to do. The saint did not continue. When things are settled here, I'll go to Redwater City. Yes, Your Excellency, Rosat said in a cold voice. Who is this person? Why does the priest not even dare to breathe loudly in front of her? And from their conversation, it seems that they did not know that the Marquis was a witch before they arrested Spear Passy. Is it a conspiracy against the Lord of Fallen Dragon Ridge? Nightingale could not help but walk out of her hiding place and look at the saint with the help of the mist. To her surprise, the saint was not wearing a god stone of retaliation. In the black and white world, the magic power in the saint's body was as eye-catching as fluorescent light. This person is a witch. Who's there? Nightingale reacted quickly. Almost in an instant, a dazzling silver light pierced towards Nightingale. Chapter 417. Years of accumulated combat experience played a role. Nightingale's brain did not have time to think, but her body had already reacted. She subconsciously leaned back, and the silver light passed by her cheek. Even in the mist, she could feel the power contained in this light, which was hot and violent. It was definitely not something ordinary could have. After avoiding the sudden attack, Nightingale took advantage of the momentum and rolled away from the other side. What happened, Lord Holy Messenger? Rosette asked in panic. It seems that a mouse has sneaked in, the witch licked her lips. Find a safe place to squat, and be careful not to get involved. You mean, there's a witch here? The priest's expression changed. I'll go and call the Judgment Warriors. No, I haven't personally hunted a witch for a long time. It's rare to have such an opportunity. How can I leave it to others? You just need to stay on the side and watch. While the two were talking, Nightingale was also looking at the woman called the Saint. Although she knew that the church was probably secretly raising witches, when she really confirmed it, she still felt extremely sad. This witch had completely become a part of the church, and may even be in a high position. From the other side's words, it could be heard that she was full of interest in hunting witches, and did not regard herself as one of her own kind. Nightingale could not help but think of the raider she met at the dock on the outskirts of King's City, who did not hesitate to stab Vendi with her dagger. These people could no longer be regarded as the same kind, and they had already embarked on a completely different path. Thinking of this, she no longer hesitated and pulled out the revolver from her waist. Even if she did not like this kind of battle, she had no other choice. Sometimes, only killing could stop killing. Where do you come from? The saint turned her head and looked at the place where Nightingale was standing. The priest can't see you, which means that you have the ability to hide yourself. You can avoid my attack, which means that you have received combat training, or have personally experienced hundreds of battles. Either way, for a wild witch, it's rare and precious. Where I come from? What does it have to do with you? Nightingale said coldly. She noticed that the man's face was covered with a ribbon that completely covered his eyes. It was an attire that only blind people would wear. The silver whip in the saint's hand did not disappear. It was still entrenched beside her, and the sharp end was like a raised snake head, shaking at her. In the mist, only magic had color. Did she rely on this strange whip to determine her position? There are some things you may not know. The church has crowned a new pope. He is tolerant and compassionate. He believes that wild witches also have the value to be redeemed. As long as you are willing to serve God, the church can wash away your sins and accept you as a pure one. The saint put her hand on her chest and said, "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for you. If you don't come here alone and no other fallen witches, you can take them to the holy city of Hermes to welcome your new life." Is that so? It sounds pretty good. Nightingale sneered twice. But if there really is a so-called sin after awakening as a witch, and you have a way to get rid of it, then why did you only set this rule now? Why didn't you save those lost sisters from the beginning? Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child who has never seen a shameless lie? She took a deep breath and said word by word, "I am not guilty." At the same time, Nightingale left the mist and pulled the trigger. The gun barrel burst into flames and let out a roar like thunder. The silver whip moved in an instant. The ribbon of light rose up and blocked in front of the saint. Suddenly, sparks overflowed. Then the whip stretched out and threw a small piece of twisted metal to the ground. It was her own bullet. This thing can actually block the flintlock. Oh. The saint raised her eyebrows. What kind of hidden weapon is this? Her voice suddenly became cold. I changed my mind. It seems that you have to die here. The silver light pounced on Nightingale again. The difference was that this time it divided into dozens of long whips, almost covering her entire position. Nightingale used the mist and crossed a distance of 3 or 4 meters in one step. Unlike ordinary objects, the long whip made of magic power could not be avoided even in the mist. She could not ignore it and pass through it head-on. She could only circle around it to avoid it. However, the enemy's attack range was too wide. The silver light flashed, and she felt numb in her calf. She could no longer maintain her balance and fell to the ground. The magic whip pierced into the position behind her like a storm, shattering the stone slabs on the ground. If she was hit directly, she would probably lose the ability to resist in an instant. Nightingale did not have time to check the injury on her leg. Lying on the ground, she shot all the bullets in the pistol in one breath. The silver whip retracted again, and turned into a rapidly rotating belt of light, blocking all the bullets. She knew that she did not have time to reload bullets in the mist. Once she could not use the flintlock to contain the enemy, she was likely to be in trouble. The space here was too narrow to be more than 5 meters away. In addition, she could not bypass the enemy's attack, so her range of movement would only become smaller and smaller. She quickly took out another pistol and emptied the bullets. Then she escaped into the mist, passed through the floor under her feet, and went straight to the second floor. She ran away. The saint roared. Summon the judgment army to block the church and guard the dungeon of the Marquis. She may be coming for this person. Ran. Rosad looked around and found no signs of damage, whether it was the doors, windows, or the entrance to the secret passage. Where? The walls, ceiling, or floor? Her ability is not as simple as being invisible. There is no magic reaction in the room. The pure witch gritted her teeth. Do as I say. She's injured and shouldn't be able to run far. Ask your people to put on God's stone of retaliation crossbow bolts. Yes. After the priest left in a hurry, she sat on the ground with weak legs. Her fingers trembled slightly, and she could not summon any strength. Damn it, what kind of weapon is this? Her ability could be said to be both offensive and defensive, especially in defense. It was regarded as the strongest shield among the pure witches. This magic light could block any attack, be it swords or crossbow bolts, but it was impossible to pass through the barrier formed by it. In order to strengthen her ability, she always kept her magic light activated. After more than 10 years, the magic power that her body could hold had become very large. Even if an ordinary crossbow shot hundreds of arrows, it would not be of any use. She would never run out of magic power to defend against flying arrows. However, her opponent's instantaneous attack had drained all of her mana. Now, she could not even maintain her ability, and her body felt extremely exhausted. This feeling of weakness and powerlessness had not appeared for many years. The saint thought bitterly, I must catch this fallen one, dead or alive. Chapter 4:18. Nightingale followed the route she had figured out earlier, passed through the roof of the third floor, and landed directly in the dungeon where the Marquis was imprisoned. Spear Passy heard the noise and looked up. Her eyes widened. You. Where did you come from? She made a shushing gesture and limped out of the iron gate. There were 2 guards standing in the hallway. Judging from their attire, they should be believers of the church. She used the mist to step behind the 2 men, pulled out her dagger and quickly slit their throats. The 2 men did not expect that someone could attack them from inside the prison. They did not even turn around to look at her until they died. Back in the dungeon, Nightingale finally had a chance to check her injuries. She saw that Soroya's specially made windproof pants had been cut open, and her calf was bleeding profusely. The wound was almost as deep as a fingernail. The enemy's magic whip had probably pierced through the pants from the side, and taken away a piece of flesh. Fortunately, it didn't hurt her bones. If it weren't for the toughness of the coated pants, she would have been more seriously injured. You're hurt. Spear frowned. It's not a big problem. We have to get out of here. If we don't, you'll become a corpse. Nightingale didn't tell the Marquis that the saint planned to take her to Hermes. In her opinion, it was no different from death, or even worse. They didn't know you were a witch before they caught you. This is all a conspiracy led by the church. All they want is the position of the Lord of Fallen Dragon Ridge. What about my brother? He's probably a puppet of the church. We don't have much time. I'll explain it to you on the way. Nightingale tied the wound with the gauze she brought with her. Where's the god's locket of retribution? The Marquis pointed to her neck. At first, it was just a chain tied to my feet. Later, they changed it to this. Damn it. Nightingale's heart sank. She saw a metal ring as thick as a thumb tied around the Marquis's neck. The god's locket of retribution was made by stuffing several god stones into the iron ring, and then closing it with a special tool. It was extremely difficult to unlock it with one's own strength. Do you remember which room the locking tool was kept in? The cell at the entrance. They locked the place where they took me. Apparently, after discovering her true identity, the saint had switched to the safest shackles, which could trap almost all witches except the extraordinary. If he wanted to take Spear away, he had to remove this thing first, or else he wouldn't be able to pull her into the mist state. Let's go to the first cell, Nightingale decided. You come with me. Enduring the stinging pain in her leg, she once again returned to the fallen guard, took the key, and opened the cell door. At this moment, a crisp bell rang from the top of the tower. The urgent sound echoed in the silent building, as if it was pounding on her heart. It's the church's alarm, Spear said, her expression changing. They'll come sooner or later, Nightingale said in a low voice. Only by moving faster than the enemy can we have a chance to survive. In a sense, the alarm at this time helped her. The believers stationed in the basement heard the bell, and all gathered at the only exit of the prison. This undoubtedly gave Nightingale a chance to catch them all in one fell swoop. She descended from the fog, aimed at these people, and pulled the trigger. Several bullets hit the first target and pierced through his body, then directly into the body of the second person, splattering a large amount of blood. The god stones of retaliation they wore were the most eye-catching targets in the black and white world. Facing the elusive Nightingale, these people held swords and shields, but they didn't know where to attack. After 2 rounds of shooting, there was no living guard left in the prison. But she knew that these were just the lowest-level believers of the church. Soon, the fully armed Judgment Army would arrive, and if they couldn't remove the god stones of retaliation by then, it would be difficult for them to escape. Come here. She quickly found the locking tool. It was an iron tool set up against the wall, with 2 rusty calipers sticking out. At first glance, it looked like a horrible instrument of torture. Spear put her neck on the caliper, and Nightingale pulled the iron bolt and shook the handle. With the help of the belt, the caliper separated and opened a gap in the god's lock of retaliation. At the same time, the sound of the shaking armor of the Judgment Army appeared at the entrance of the dungeon. There they are, someone shouted. Aim and shoot. Go. Nightingale pulled Spear into the mist, but a mass of black holes shot at her and instantly tore the mist into pieces. There were god stones of retaliation on the bolts. Nightingale felt cold sweat on her forehead. After getting rid of the cover, they were completely exposed to the Judgment Warriors. She had to admit that the training these Judgment Warriors received was very different from that of ordinary believers. In the first round of shooting, they only shot the bolts roughly in the direction of the passage, so that the anti-magic effect of the god stone could block the way. Only half of them participated in the first round of shooting. The other half were waiting for the moment when the witches showed up. With a clear target in mind, the second round of shooting came in no time. Hearing the buzzing of the loosened bolts behind her, Nightingale pulled the Marquis in front of her and shouted, "Lower your head." A piercing pain came from her back. She didn't know how many bolts had hit her. The pain spread like fire, but she didn't stop for even a moment. Rounding the corner of the cell, Nightingale felt a salty taste in her mouth. The pain probably made her bite her lip. "Are you okay?" I'm fine," the Marquis said in a daze. You blocked the bolts for me?" "You'd be dead if they hit you, but it won't hurt me if they hit me." Nightingale touched her back and found that none of the bolts had pierced through Soroya's windbreaker. Although her back felt like it was on fire, as long as the bolts didn't penetrate her body, they would only bruise at most. More importantly, the powder of the god stone would not seep into her body. The Judgment Warriors hurriedly chased after them. They probably did not expect the 2 of them to be able to block the second wave of crossbow bolts without a shield. When they stopped to shoot, the distance between the 2 of them had already increased. Freed from the restraint of the god stone of retaliation, Nightingale grabbed Spear, unfolded the mist, and rushed up along the ever-changing lines. They passed through the floor and the soil to the outside of the tower. Then, she took out a bamboo tube from her waist bag and pulled the fuse. A dazzling red light burst out of the bamboo tube and rushed into the sky. Then it exploded into a circle of dense light spots, as if there were countless stars in the sky. She remembered that when His Highness gave this to her, he had said that a cloud-piercing arrow would bring thousands of troops. Now she didn't need thousands of troops. She just hoped that Maggie could see this signal. Soon, a huge shadow fell from the sky. Maggie landed next to the tower with great force. Her burly body directly crushed the wall, and the airflow from her wings blew away the surrounding fog. What is this?" Spear Passy couldn't help but widen her eyes. "My companion." Nightingale asked Lightning to help fix the Marquis to Maggie. She used the last of her strength to climb onto Maggie's back and patted Maggie's rough body. "Take off." "Ow ow." Maggie roared at the Judgment Warriors who were chasing after them. Then she flapped her wings and soared into the sky. Carrying the 2 of them, they soon disappeared into the night sky. Chapter 419. On the ridge of Fallen Dragon Ridge, Lightning found a leeward place and skillfully set up a tent that could accommodate 4 people. The burning bonfire dispelled the cold. Nightingale rolled up her trousers, revealing her blood-stained calf, which was swollen from where she had been hit by the saint. She hadn't felt anything when she had been running with her teeth clenched, but now that she had relaxed, she found it extremely difficult to move her legs. If Maggie hadn't arrived in time, she really didn't know how far she could have run with the Marquis. It was extremely dangerous to walk through the fog when it was difficult to move. Those ever-changing lines were not only stairs but also sharp blades, which could easily cut one into pieces if one didn't grasp them well. "Let me help you, Koo." Maggie rummaged through her big backpack and found a pile of first aid supplies. In addition to cotton cloth and a small bottle of alcohol, there were also some herbs processed by leaf, which were the main medical means in the Witch Cooperation Association. When the pungent alcohol was poured on the wound, even Nightingale couldn't help but let out a muffled groan, her eyebrows tightly pressed together. If His Highness hadn't told her that this thing could effectively kill small creatures and prevent the demonic plague from eroding the wound, she would have thought it was no different from torture. Fortunately, the coolness brought by the herbs quickly dispelled the burning pain. After the wound was bandaged, she immediately felt a lot more comfortable. "You're back," the Marquis whispered. "Is it okay?" "What's wrong with my back?" Lightning went into the tent with a bundle of firewood. "She was shot by those people's crossbow while trying to save me." Spear sounded a little depressed. "It's not a big deal. It's just like being punched a few times." Nightingale curled her lips. "At most, I won't be able to lie down and sleep tonight. It's better to apply some herbs." Lightning fiddled with the branches in the fire pit, splashing some sparks. Leaf's medicine can not only stop the bleeding, but also has a good effect on bruises. "Lie on me, Koo." Maggie sat down and patted her thigh. "I'll apply the medicine for you, Koo." Looking at the white-haired girl's serious eyes, Nightingale could not dissuade her. In the end, she could only nod. "All right." After taking off her clothes, she covered her chest and lay on Maggie's lap. Then she heard the Marquis gasp. She didn't need to look to know that her originally smooth back was definitely red and swollen, with patches of blue and purple, but it only looked scary. She disapprovingly thought that this kind of injury was nothing for a witch with a strong self-healing ability, and it would disappear in 2 or 3 days. While applying medicine, Nightingale coughed twice and said, "What do you plan to do next, Lord Marquis?" "Your brother, Redwin, was instigated by the church to betray you. Before that, neither he nor the church knew that you were a witch." She briefly told her what she had heard in the tower. "They should be after your position as lord. Even if you're not a witch, they'll still think you're a devil's henchman and execute you. This isn't a difficult thing for the church. They dared to murder a Marquis in public." Spear gritted her teeth. "I'll make Redwin pay for the moderate church. What the church does is far beyond your imagination." Nightingale shook her head. "Even the king doesn't blink before taking action. The kingdom of Everwinter and the kingdom of Wolfheart are the best examples." Spear was suddenly stunned. After a while she said, "Is the church really going to annex the 4 kingdoms? I've only heard this from some merchants in the neighboring countries, but most of the nobles in King's City think it's just nonsense." "The nobles in King's City also say that Roland Wimbledon is a rebel king." She shrugged. "If His Highness guessed correctly, that's only the first step of the church's plan. But I can't tell you about the conspiracy behind it for now, unless you join the Witch Union. Besides, the church definitely didn't plan this coup in a day or 2. Most of your subordinates should have already sided with Redwin, who sold more benefits. If you want to take back Fallen Dragon Ridge, you can also ask His Highness for help. He will really help me. Of course. It's our duty to eradicate the church." Nightingale chuckled. The Marquis fell silent and seemed to be hesitating. "Don't worry." Nightingale knew the hesitation in her heart, which was also what most witches worried about before going to Border Town. "If you want to leave the Western region, you can do so at any time. His Highness never forces anyone." Did he really realize the coexistence of witches and ordinary people? This was the second time Nightingale heard the Marquis ask about this, and every time she answered this question, she would always feel a surge of pride. Yes, His Highness's territory is such a place. It's the holy mountain of witches. Spearpassie's face looked uncertain in the firelight. After a long time, she nodded slightly and asked, "Shall we leave tomorrow?" "Not for now," Nightingale and Lightning said in unison. Then they looked at each other, and could not help but laugh. "The church will definitely try to report this news to the holy city. In the next 2 days, we must intercept the carrier pigeons released by the enemy," she explained to the Countess. "After that, Maggie will send you back to Border Town, and I have other tasks to complete." In the room at the top of the tower, she remembered that the saint had said that she would soon set off for Redwater City after dealing with things here. Obviously, every time she arrived in a city, she would set off an undercurrent. No matter how big the influence was, it would always cause trouble for His Highness. Moreover, this person had seen her attack methods. If she could intercept her, the church's plan would inevitably be thwarted, and she might be able to find a lot of information from her. Nightingale took a deep breath. She decided to intercept the church's team of messengers, but she was not sure whether His Highness Roland would agree with her plan. If he asked her to go back, she did not intend to stubbornly go. 3 days later, after sending off the Marquis, Maggie returned to Fallen Dragon Ridge again. This time, she was accompanied by 2 witches from Sleeping Island. "Why are you here?" Nightingale looked at them in surprise. "His Highness Roland asked us to help you." Andrea jumped off the back of the beast gracefully, took off her hood, and flipped her blonde hair. "The reward is 2 ice cream buns." "How can I be left out of the mission to wipe out the church?" Ashes said with a smile. "His Highness said you can do it, but you must be careful, Ku." Maggie changed back to her human form. "He said he'll wait for you in the castle." "Is that so?" Nightingale suddenly felt a warmth in her heart. "I see. How many people do they have?" Ashes raised her eyebrows. "I heard there's a witch?" "I'm not sure, but there are at most 20 judgment warriors, as well as their attendants and believers," she said word by word. "I don't care about the others, but I must deal with the witch." Chapter 420. When Lightning detected a large group of people coming from the north gate of Fallen Dragon Ridge, they had already been on the ridge for a week. The size of the emissary delegation of the church was similar to what Nightingale had expected at the beginning. The armored judgment warriors walked at the front of the team. There were 25 people in total. Behind them was a long supply team. Judging from their dressing, they were probably composed of believers and mercenaries. There were about 100 people in total. Except for the judgment warriors who rode on horses, the others walked on foot. There were 2 carriages in the emissary delegation, and the saint was undoubtedly in one of them. The 5 people quietly followed the team toward Redwater City. According to the plan, when the enemy team was out of the range of the sentry tower of Fallen Dragon Ridge, and could not get support quickly, they would take action. In the mist, Nightingale quietly looked at the 4-wheeled carriage in the middle of the team. Through the twisted silhouette of the carriage, she could see the silver magic light looming. If she was alone, she might be able to find a chance to kill the saint of the church, but she could not guarantee that everyone would be buried here. Now, with the help of the witches of Sleeping Island, the possibility of sealing the news in the southern region was much higher. Once these people disappeared, it would be at least the next spring before Hermes realized it. Even if they wanted to find out the mystery of the disappearance of the emissary delegation, it would be very difficult. Nightingale didn't like killing, but this time she took the initiative to do so. In order to reduce the burden of His Highness, and to make the holy mountain of witches last forever, she did not regret turning into a sharp blade. As the emissary delegation entered a woodland, Nightingale saw a black shadow in the sky approaching from afar. Maggie folded her wings and roared as she swooped down. The horses immediately neighed in fear and ran away uncontrollably. The people who witnessed this scene were all dumbfounded and did not know what to do for a moment. The horrible giant beast did not rush into the crowd to bite and trample them as they had imagined. Instead, it spread its wings when it was about to land and swept over the team. The wind pressure made it difficult for the people to open their eyes. One person jumped off the back of the giant beast and landed on the ground. Enemy attack! A judgment warrior shouted in the emissary delegation. Only then did the believers come to their senses. They pulled out their weapons and slashed at the strange enemy trapped in the middle of the group. In Nightingale's black and white vision, a group of lightless black holes tightly wrapped around the other party. If it were an ordinary witch, she would not be able to fight back at all. However, their opponent was an extraordinaire, Ashes. A streak of sword light flashed past, and the believers near her were all cut in half at the waist. Like harvested wheat, they immediately fell to the ground. She did not use the iconic heavy sword, but an ordinary one-handed iron sword, so that Maggie could carry another witch at the same time as her. The iron sword quickly broke in the slash, but there were still many weapons scattered around for her to pick up. Whether it was a halberd, a club, an iron hammer, or a machete, they were all deadly weapons in her hands. Blood splattered and limbs flew everywhere. Ashes had cut the team in half with her own strength. The mercenaries in the rear were also unable to go forward to help, and they found themselves in another predicament. Andrea's figure was like a sprite leaping in the forest. She used tree trunks and branches as cover, constantly changing her position, and at the same time, using every gap to shoot arrows. Every time she shot, someone would be hit between the eyebrows and fall to the ground. In less than a quarter of an hour, the whole team became a mess. Screams, shouts, and the sound of fighting intertwined, echoing in the silent forest. Nightingale did not stop to join the battle. She quickly moved through the fog, closely following her target. There was only one enemy she had to deal with: the church's saint, the witch hunter. After the two carriages ran wildly for a while, the frightened horses finally calmed down, but they did not turn back. Instead, they left the main road and rushed into the forest in two different directions. It seemed that the saint realized that there was an extremely difficult extraordinaire among her enemies. For most witches, an extraordinaire wearing a god's stone of retaliation was almost invincible. But this still could not escape from Nightingale's tracking. She had already determined the location of the saint. As for the person in the other carriage, it should be a priest or a high-ranking person such as a priest. The latter would be taken care of by Lightning and Maggie. Passing through the potholes in the forest, the carriage was bumpy and felt like it was about to fall apart, but the coachman still kept waving his whip, as if someone was urging him to go faster. Nightingale closed the distance between her and the carriage, aimed at the 4 judgment warriors around her, and pulled the trigger. In order to ensure a hit rate, she would always move behind the enemy and fire only when they were in a straight line, and the distance between them was no more than 10 meters. Hearing the gunshot, the judgment warriors immediately scattered, but they were only a few steps away from Nightingale. Full armor was meaningless in front of a large-caliber bullet. The bullet that penetrated through the armor would only cause more damage to the body. After getting rid of the 4 judgment warriors, she aimed at the horses. As the 2 galloping horses crashed to the ground, the carriage that had lost its traction flew out diagonally due to the inertia. It crashed into a tree trunk, and the fragile wooden carriage immediately broke into pieces. Among the flying debris, a figure wrapped in silver light rolled out. Nightingale did not hesitate to aim and shoot. The light made of magic power seemed to be self-aware and blocked the bullets one by one. She quickly moved away and reloaded a new cartridge. "Traitor!" cried the saint, with a roar of rage, and rushed towards her hiding place. But this time, the 2 of them were in a completely different situation. No longer confined by the narrow room, Nightingale took a step back, and the saint had to take more than 10 steps to catch up with her. The effective range of a revolver was about 50 meters, far beyond the range of a witch's ability. The saint's silver whip could not touch her at all, but the bullets she shot could threaten the saint's life at any time. Even though the hit rate was reduced to only 1 or 2 out of 5 shots hitting the target at this distance, she still had plenty of time to reload the bullets and fire continuously. The silver light gradually dimmed. After the 5th round of shooting, a bullet hit her left shoulder, and the second bullet penetrated her abdomen. The saint could no longer support herself. She staggered 2 steps and fell to the ground. Nightingale did not rush to approach the saint. Instead, she returned to the place where the carriage had fallen apart, picked up a god's stone of retaliation, and walked toward the saint. Her retreat route was completely around the carriage, so that it would be easier for her to search the scene afterward. When she walked up to the bloodstained witch, she suddenly stretched out her right hand, only to find that the silver light did not penetrate the enemy's body as expected. "You damned devil, the gods will judge you." She spat out a mouthful of blood and said through gritted teeth. Nightingale expressionlessly pointed the muzzle at the saint's chest and said, "Really? I'll wait for that day." Then she pressed the trigger. Chapter 421. The smoke dissipated and the forest returned to its tranquility. The witch's long braids scattered like white flowers under her body. Hot blood flowed freely from her back, and soon formed a circle of dark red puddles. The blood slowly seeped into the ground and melted the hard and cold soil. The air was filled with the smell of iron. Nightingale squatted down and untied the witch's blindfold. She found that the witch's face looked unexpectedly young, and should be about the same age as herself. However, the scars around her eyes destroyed the overall beauty. Her eyes looked like they had been repeatedly burned by a red-hot iron. Her skin was curled up and reddish-brown, and the outline of her eye sockets had disappeared. This was undoubtedly caused by acquired wounds. Nightingale gently touched the wrinkled scars. As for whether she had suffered these before becoming a witch or after serving the church, she did not know. But these were no longer important. From this moment on, she could no longer hurt any more witches, nor did she have to endure other tortures. She searched the saint's body and found a letter, a seal, and an emblem from the inside pocket of her robe. The emblem was a circle divided into a cross with a clenched fist in the center. Apart from this, she did not carry any other items, whether it was the golden dragon or jewelry. Perhaps she had never enjoyed anything in her life. Nightingale could not help but think. "Hey, look what I caught." Lightning's voice came from midair. She looked up and saw the little girl flying over with a struggling man in her hand, and then throwing him to the ground. The man uttered a painful groan and rolled twice. He seemed to want to get up, but his hands and feet were tied, so he could only helplessly twist back and forth on the ground. Judging by the man's attire, he should be the priest sitting in the other carriage. "Where's Maggie?" She guided Ashes to chase the fleeing Judgment army. Lightning walked to the side of the saint. "Is this the witch trained by the church?" "Yes," Nightingale whispered. "She won't hunt us anymore." Looking at her, it's hard to believe that she sees us as enemies that must be killed. The little girl sighed. If it wasn't for the church, none of this would have happened. Nightingale looked coldly at the captured man. When the latter saw the witch lying in a pool of blood, his eyes immediately widened and he tried to say something, but he couldn't because of the cloth in his mouth. She pulled out the cloth. "What do you have to say for yourself?" "Ahem. You killed Bishop Tayfun's pure witch. You audacious devils. Sooner or later you'll be hung at the city gate by the church and fed to the crows." "Even if we didn't kill her, being caught by the church won't be any better," Nightingale said. "And compared to that, you should worry about your own situation first." "Even if I die, I will be redeemed by the gods, but you will only sink into hell and suffer eternal torment," he shouted. "That's why I gagged him." Lightning spread out her hands. Nightingale stuffed the cloth back and said, "Let His Highness deal with him. I heard from him that Iron Axe is very good at interrogating people like this." It was already afternoon when Maggie arrived with the two sleeping island witches. Ashes jumped down from the back of the giant beast and landed beside Nightingale. "Are you hurt?" "Not bad." She shook her head. "What about you?" "Of course none of them escaped," Ashes said with a proud smile. "She's dead?" After landing, Andrea looked at the saint and said, "I thought you would spare her life." "The enemy is a witch. Any hesitation and carelessness are extremely dangerous." Ashes curled her lips. "If it were me, I wouldn't have let her live. Tsk. You don't have the slightest mercy for your own kind." "She's not our own kind. She's a puppet controlled by the church," the extraordinary said carelessly. "Besides, sometimes our own kind is much crueler than the otherworldlings. At least I've never seen demonic beasts or demons imprison people and repeatedly torture them for years." After saying that, She took off her blood-stained gloves and put her hand in front of Nightingale. Your actions and performance are admirable. You did the right thing. The latter stared at her for a moment, and then took the hand. Thank you. Even a person like her can comfort me, Nightingale thought. She probably doesn't want me to feel that killing a witch is too much of a burden. Lightning also put her hand in front of Andrea's. I think this victory is worth celebrating. Then Maggie said, "Coo." Andrea rolled her eyes and put her hand in front of everyone's. I have to say, if it's just your hand, I don't want to touch it at all. This is for Nightingale's sake. Okay, I know. Ashes raised her eyebrows. Then, the five of them raised their hands to the sky at the same time, like a sturdy tower standing in the cold wind. In addition to collecting the information carried by the emissary delegation, they also needed to bury the traces left by the battle. The group of people busied themselves in the forest for 2 days to deal with these trivial matters. By the time they returned to Border Town, it was already 3 days later. When they landed in the castle's back garden, Nightingale was immediately surrounded by her sisters. I heard you were injured. Where's the wound? Nana shouted. She's been waiting for you for a long time. Why did she come back so late? Lily complained. Do you feel pain now? Lucia asked eagerly. This batch of herbs was specially made by me. It can stop bleeding and reduce swelling. The effect should be good, right? Leaf laughed. You were too careless. You dared to run into the church alone. I'm afraid you won't be so lucky next time. This was Vendy's voice. Forget it. It's good that you came back safely. This was Scroll's voice. Looking at their concern, Nightingale sincerely felt a surge of warmth from the bottom of her heart. She didn't know what kind of life the church's witches lived, but she knew what kind of scene the Witch Union was. There was no doubt that this was a place that was worth sacrificing everything for. Then she saw His Highness Roland. Lightning had already thrown herself into his arms, sticking to him like a gecko. Maggie also flew over and lay on Roland's shoulder, rubbing his cheek. Although Nightingale also wanted to do the same, she knew that she was no longer a child. She resisted the urge to hug him, walked in front of His Highness, and said with a smile, I'm back. Well, I've been waiting for you for a long time. The prince's smile was still as familiar as ever. Take a hot bath first and have a good rest. I put several bags of honey-grilled fish in the office drawer. Well, I won't be polite. Nightingale raised the corner of her mouth. She was once again convinced that what she was doing was right. Chapter 422. That night, Roland held a grand banquet in the Lord's castle. This was the first time that the Witch Union had initiated an attack on the church. In addition to rescuing Spear Passy, they also captured Priest Hermes. When the 5 witches who had participated in the battle stepped onto the stage, the hall burst into applause. Roland, who rarely drank 2 glasses of Evelyn's special iced white wine with fruit juice. Although it was only a small victory, the long months of the demons itself made people nervous, so he also hoped to take this opportunity to relax everyone's mood. The next day, when Roland walked into the office, rubbing his dizzy head, Nightingale was already sitting cross-legged on the table, waiting. Don't you need to rest? He asked with a smile. Ever since he agreed to intercept the emissary delegation, he had never really felt at ease. Even though he knew that once they entered the open area, her mist ability would make her invincible, he was still worried about accidents. After all, this was not a daily practice but a real battle of life and death. Now that he saw her in high spirits, he suddenly felt much better. Nightingale swallowed the dried fish and said, Of course not. I've recovered to my best state. As soon as Roland sat back in his seat, she jumped off the table, went around the back of the chair and hugged him. If I rest for one more day, I won't have to see you for one more day. The prince was slightly stunned. Actually, I wanted to do that in the castle garden yesterday. But it doesn't matter now, Nightingale whispered in his ear. She didn't let go of him until she heard footsteps outside the office. She then disappeared into the mist. Your Highness, the guard shouted. Marquis Passy, the Lord of Fallen Dragon Ridge, is here to see you. Let her in. Roland cleared his throat and straightened his posture. Spear Passy walked into the office, bowed, and then sat in front of the table. I've carefully considered your requirements. What do you think? He poured her a cup of tea. While Nightingale, Ashes and the others were fighting the church, he had not been idle. Other than bringing the Marquis around the town, he had also held many discussions with her. During that time, Roland briefly explained the crisis that the kingdom was about to face, the origins of the church, and the threat of the devil. He also told her about his plans for the future. When Spear heard the origin of the church and the reason for hunting witches, she was so shocked that her eyes almost popped out. If it weren't for Tilly and Agatha's testimonies, she probably wouldn't have believed that witches had once ruled the entire barbarian land. But since then, her attitude had changed a lot. Taking back the power of enfeoffment, implementing the same laws and administrative system, not inheriting positions and not selling. I can accept these requests, but... She paused. I'm just curious, do you really intend to promote them to the whole territory? That's right. If we don't do this, Grey Castle will just be a pile of loose sand. Roland nodded. Before the arrival of the final enemy, I have to gather as much power as possible. By doing this, you'll be offending all the nobles, Spear said slowly. Especially the non-inheriting of positions. If I understand correctly, being the lord of a territory is also a kind of position. In this way, your identity as the rebel king will be confirmed. So I never expect them to take the initiative to give in. He tapped the table lightly. Before the fateful battle of divine will, the resistance of the nobles isn't the most important thing to consider. Besides, I'm not trying to kill them all. As long as these people can integrate into the new system, and even keep their own territories, they'll only lose the power of enfeoffment. I believe they'll make a wise choice. Centralization of power was a system that could only be achieved when the central government had absolute power. If the local forces were too strong, not to mention centralization of power, even his position could be overthrown at any time. Unlike a year ago, the town now had the power to change. When this step was completed, Grey Castle would only have one real ruler, and that would be himself. It seems that you've made up your mind. Spear sighed. If I don't accept it, I'll be overthrown by your army. In this plan, what I lack the most is manpower, Roland said sincerely. Especially managers who have the experience of governing a city and a place. Just as I said, you did not lose your territory, and you can also openly appear in front of the people as a witch. You will no longer be threatened by the church. The Marquis was silent for a moment. I also have a request. Go ahead. After you help me take back Fallen Dragon territory, I hope that nothing will change for the time being, she said bluntly. Unless Timothy is overthrown, I can only stand on your side without any scruples. A perfect answer. Roland thought. It wasn't a direct rejection, but also left room for negotiation. In layman's terms, he had to prove to her that unifying Grey Castle wasn't just empty talk, and that he really had the strength to do so. Only then would she be willing to side with him. Then it's a deal. He didn't care about the Marquis's little calculation at all. If the spring offensive went well, Timothy's fall would be even faster than the recovery of Fallen Dragon territory. By the way, Your Highness. Spear hesitated for a moment. Can I go with the witch's lessons tonight? Roland was stunned. Those are very basic lessons. I don't think you can learn anything from them. I think those calculations are very interesting. She shook her head and said, I've never seen anything like them in the arithmetic books before. Does she mean the multiplication table or algebraic equations? He couldn't help laughing. Of course, as long as you're willing to join the Witch Union. After lunch, Ironaxe brought good news. He's willing to talk? Roland was a little surprised. So soon. According to Nightingale, he had thought that the captured priest was a stubborn person. Not everyone has an iron will, Your Highness. Ironaxe replied solemnly. The Sand Nation has some unique interrogation methods, which cause very little physical harm, but are extremely destructive to the will. They can even make people feel that death is a kind of release. He has already surpassed many ordinary people. That's right, Roland thought. Professional spies not only have extraordinary willpower, but also have to undergo special interrogation training to keep their mouths shut. Obviously, no one in this era has such experience. Take me to him. Roland nodded. I have a lot of questions to ask. Chapter 423. The town's dungeon had not changed much since he came here a year ago. Large-scale infrastructure construction had not taken this place into account. Although the houses and roads above had all been changed, becoming orderly and bright, the underground prison was still full of a rotten and dilapidated atmosphere. Moss grew on the stone walls, and dirty water flowed down the stairs, making a noisy dripping sound. The only difference was that there were few prisoners left in the dungeon. With the expansion of the territory, people could always find a job to fill their stomachs as long as they were willing to work. As for the scoundrels who refused to repent, they were all sent to the mines, where they were naturally taught how to behave with whips and sticks. Since the lowest cell had been destroyed by Anna, and there was no need to repair it, they simply sealed the entrance and abandoned it. Roland followed Ironaxe to the center of the third floor of the prison, and saw the imprisoned priest, who was also the only prisoner on this floor. He was not hung on a rack, nor was he tortured to a bloody pulp. In short, it was completely different from the interrogation scene that Roland had envisioned. He was sitting in a corner of the cell, leaning against the cold wall. His clothes were basically intact, but he looked a little dispirited, pale and dazed, as if he had lost his focus. Is he all right? Roland asked in a low voice. Not a big problem, Your Highness. Ironaxe bowed and replied. If you have any questions, you can ask him directly. The prince nodded. It seemed that the Sand Nation's way of interrogation was indeed different, but he was not interested in how Ironaxe did it, nor did he want to find out whether it was humane or not. He just wanted to get the result. He cleared his throat, sat on the long wooden bench beside the cell, and asked through the iron bars, What's your name? You're the fourth prince of Grey Castle. Roland Wimbledon? The priest's eyes changed a little. Look what you've done. You've released the power of the devil. His Highness is asking for your name, Ironaxe said coldly. If you don't want to repeat last night's punishment, you'd better not talk nonsense. The priest's expression suddenly froze. He paused for a moment before lowering his head and saying, My name is Cainfas. I heard you're from the holy city of Hermes? Roland looked at him and asked, Who is the witch who came with you? Is she also from the holy city? What position do you have in the church? Cainfas hesitated for a long time before replying. Her name is Aurora, a pure witch of Lord Tayfun. She doesn't hold any position in the church. Tayfun? The prince thought for a while. He seemed to have seen this name somewhere before. He's one of the 3 archbishops of the holy city, and is in charge of the church's external affairs. He's also an important figure second only to His Holiness the Pope, the priest explained. Roland finally remembered that he had indeed seen this person at the royal city's celebration. On that day, Wimbledon III held a grand coming-of-age ceremony for Tilly Wimbledon. The bishop sent by the church to host the ceremony was Tayfun. In his memory, he looked like a kind old man. His smile was filled with love and compassion, as if nothing ugly in the world could have anything to do with him. What are pure witches? Cainfas hesitated again until Ironaxe scolded him. He reluctantly explained. Pure witches are witches trained by the church. Only the archbishops or His Holiness the Pope can control them. I don't know much about them. Roland scratched his ear and asked Nightingale for confirmation. The response he got was that Nightingale was not lying. How many people know that the church hides witches? The priest shook his head. I was only told by Lord Tayfun in the last 2 years. He told me not to mention it to other believers, so I don't know who knows. It seems that the church is very secretive about training pure witches. At least they don't implement 2 sets of rules in public, Roland thought. This is good news for me. He had only guessed before, but now it was confirmed. He had one more piece of evidence to destroy the church's faith. If the believers knew that the doctrine they regarded as the truth was just a piece of fictitious waste paper, and that the church secretly adopted the devil's minions in the name of eliminating the devil's forces, what would they think? Why did you plot to frame the Lord of Fallen Dragon Ridge? Why did you want to take her to Hermes? I don't know. My task was to monitor Aurora's actions. Only she knew the specific purpose. I changed my mind later because Aurora found out that the Lord was a real witch, and the new pope asked us to send the captured witches to the holy city for purification. Purification, Roland snorted. Do you believe it yourself? If the purified witches... No, the pure witches are innocent. Why does the church hide their existence? Because some believers aren't devout enough, so this is the only way. His voice became lower and lower, and finally he closed his mouth. The prince sneered. Where do you plan to go after leaving Fallen Dragon Ridge? Redwater City. What's next? Impassable Castle. Anything else? Only these 3 cities. After revealing the information about the pure witches, the priest seemed to have given up and replied numbly, Lord Tayfun didn't say when we'll return. Before the new order is issued, we'll stay in Impassable Castle. This answer matched the contents of the secret letter seized from the witches. Why these 3 cities? Canefus shook his head. It seems that this guy doesn't know much. For the church, he's probably just an insurance beside the pure witches. Roland touched his chin and thought. Fallen Dragon Ridge is in the southern region, Redwater City is in the center of the kingdom, and Impassable Castle is at the junction of the northern region and the western region. They are basically unrelated, and neither are they pass or hub cities. Even if the church wants to overthrow Grey Castle, it should be unlikely that they will attack them first. If there were any similarities between them, it would probably be that all 3 cities happen to fall on the border of the western region. An idea suddenly came to his mind. Is the mission of the emissaries actually aimed at me? The interrogation lasted until the evening. When Roland sorted out the information he had obtained and got up to leave, he noticed that the priest was leaning against the wall, motionless like a living corpse. He neither begged for mercy nor rebuked him, which surprised him. Aren't you going to ask me what I'm going to do with you? You used torture to force me to say all this. God will see it, Canefus said with his eyes closed. In the end, it's God who will judge me, not you. As for what you'll do with me, it doesn't matter. Your Highness, give him to me for one more night, Ironax said in a low voice. I'll change his attitude. No, that's all. Since the priest had said what needed to be said, Roland was not interested in torturing him for the sake of torturing him. He'll be judged, not by God, but by the people. Chapter 424. For the first time since the beginning of winter, a wooden stage was set up in the center of the square of Border Town. But this time, it was not for a theatrical performance, but for the first public trial of the town. The announcement had been sent out 2 days ago. On the day of the trial, the wooden stage was already crowded with people. The expanded square was much larger, but it still could not accommodate so many people. Sporadic snowflakes were falling from the sky, but everyone was in high spirits and completely ignored the wind and snow. When Roland stepped onto the stage, the atmosphere suddenly reached its peak. Looking at the people waving their arms at him, he could not help but sigh. Compared to a year ago, when he participated in Anna's trial here, he was almost a laughing stock in the eyes of the nobles, and his influence on the people was even closer to zero. In just a year, the situation had become completely different. With a burst of cheers, Priest Campus was also pressed onto the stage. Facing the dense crowd, his expression changed a little. Probably this kind of situation was not uncommon in the eyes of the church's higher-ups. They had long been accustomed to the worship of believers, and their words and actions could influence the lives of the people. Roland thought, but this time, he was afraid that he would not be able to experience the glory of the past. Next to the wooden stage were the witches of the Union. Their eyes were filled with irrepressible excitement. For them, who were often slandered, hunted and unfairly judged, this time, their roles were completely reversed. The witches were the victims, the accusers and the perpetrators, while the target of the trial was changed to the church. It was not that they had not imagined such a scene, but they did not expect that this day would come so soon. Roland pressed his hand down, and the people suddenly quieted down. Greetings, my subjects. Today, I have gathered everyone here to announce a shameless crime to you. The church has concealed the truth from the beginning. If it were not for the fact that the priest from the Holy City had been arrested in a case of rebellion, I would not have been able to know such shocking news. 2 days ago, Roland repeatedly thought about how to publicize the crimes of the church more effectively. Obviously, the rebellion in Fallen Dragon Ridge could not be the focus, because the people would not care about what happened in a distant small city. The Battle of Divine Will and the Witch Kingdom could not be mentioned either, because the things that happened hundreds of years ago were too vague, and exposing the existence of the demons could easily cause panic. If he wanted to arouse the anger of the people, he had to start with the things that they cared about. In other words, he had to be grounded. There was no doubt that the witches who lived here were the closest to their daily lives. The church claims that witches are the devil's minions, unclean and ominous. But in fact, whether it is the Pope or the Archbishop, they are raising witches, and the scale is astonishing. This is what the priest himself said. Roland turned to look at him. Am I right? After a long silence, Campus replied, yes. A commotion broke out among the crowd. Your Highness, is he really a priest from the Holy City? Someone asked. Of course. Roland cast a praising look at Echo. Moreover, he was sent to Grey Castle in the name of the church's saint. The documents he carried proved his identity. Instead of letting them think about it later, it was better to let Echo raise the question first, and then he would answer it himself. Moreover, these things were genuine, and there was no need for him to forge them. Back to what I said before, my people, the prince continued. Pay attention to the word I used, raise. Yes, they collect the baby girls and female orphans from all over the kingdom, and send them to the monastery in the Holy City, where they are raised like animals. Due to the low rate of witches, only a small number of people can become witches, and then they are further trained. Those who can't become witches become the playthings of the believers of the church. Know these. Campus raised his head and opened his mouth, but found that he could not make any sound. In order to get more witches, in addition to taking in female wanderers in the name of relief, they even collude with the black street rats to steal babies. Think about it, my people. If there is a church in this town, not only will you lose Miss Nana, but your own children and children may also disappear for no reason. But they claim that witches are evil people who have been tempted by the devil, and they also drive the believers to persecute these innocent women. Can you tolerate Miss Nana being framed by them? No, Your Highness, never. The square instantly boiled up. The crowd clenched their fists and expressed their indignation to the priest. Miss Nana can't be evil. She cured my burns with her own hands. I watched her grow up, and my daughter went to Teacher Carr's academy with her. If not for her, I would have died under the claws of demonic beasts. She is the angel of the First Army. Roland paused for a moment, waiting for the crowd to vent their anger, and then suppress their discussion. So why do they do this? This question caused a stir among the people. Because the church needs witches to maintain their rule. Not waiting for them to speculate too much, the prince directly said, everyone has seen the witches' ability. It can be said that they are diverse and incredible. In addition to Miss Nana's ability to heal wounds and Miss Lily's ability to kill the demonic plague, there are many other abilities that can change our lives. For example, the water supply equipment in the community, which was personally made by Miss Anna and Miss Soraya. The guns used by the First Army, the steam engine used to pull the mine carts. These are all gifts brought by the witches. It can be said that without them, this town would not be able to have its current appearance. But everything has two sides. Just like a sword, it can be used to fight against demonic beasts, but it can also be used to kill innocent people. The church wants to use the witch's ability to harm good people. Those who do not listen to their teachings are regarded as the abandoned children of God. But in fact, the high level of the church is doing heinous deeds, completely regardless of whether their God is watching them or not. My people, if your children were taken away by the church and trained to be the whips and blades in their hands, then turned against you, how sad it would be. Roland turned around, walked in front of Cainfas, unrolled a long scroll, and asked loudly, Regarding the accusations recorded on this scroll, do you have anything else to say? These are all true. The priest's eyes widened, as if he could not believe that this answer actually came from his own mouth. I plead guilty. After hearing the confession, the crowd suddenly burst into an uproar. I give the power of judgment to you. Roland took advantage of the crowd's excitement and said loudly, in the face of such evil acts, your choice is dash. Execute him. Execute him. Execute him. Everyone's voice became uniform, and soon there was only one voice left in the square. In the winter snow fluttering over Border Town, the people made their choice. You're tuning in to the Lime's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.